I'm drawing infinite cards in Marvel. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 251 The Scorched Hulk. Eternal Fire. This piece of fire at the beginning of the universe has been burning since ancient times. Stars form in explosions, give birth to life, die out, run out of energy, freeze or explode into black holes. The Milky Way was born out of darkness and desolation, and countless races were created over hundreds of millions of years, and thousands of stars are shining brightly with the light of civilization. This group of fire is still burning, so it is called the Eternal Fire. It is more accurate to say that it is the embodied rules of the universe than fire. This group of eternal fire contains the mysterious power of rebirth and destruction. But now, Kyle took this plate of fire and directly used it as a weapon to cover the Hulk's head. If the Flame Giant, the former owner of the Eternal Flame, would have squatted in his cave, beating his chest and sighing, if Wang Aoding knew, he would probably be stunned on the throne for a while. That is an eternal fire comparable to the original stone of the universe. Can you give it some respect? Kyle heard the Hulk's screams and the white smoke overflowing with a hissing sound. This effect also shocked him, and he quickly picked up the golden fire pan again. Cool, the golden plate was upright, and the inner eternal fire was still burning on its own, neither extinguished nor strengthened. Kyle relaxed, and then looked at the Hulk ahead. His golden pupils suddenly contracted, showing a look full of shock. Hulk's appearance at this time is really too miserable. It was still writhing in pain on the ground, and most of its hair was directly burned away. The monster's face and strong chest were scorched black, like raw meat on the fire, which was well roasted until it was half cooked. You know, this is the Hulk. Skins ignore hot weapon ammo, a heavy hammer with an impact force of dozens of tons, and a divine flame at a temperature of, degrees Celsius are just skin trauma. And now, under the eternal fire, it is directly roasted half cooked? Kyle slammed his mouth, and the stinging Hulk was roasted by the eternal fire, and it smelled so ripe? What he didn't know was that all creatures were treated equally in front of the eternal flame. Although they only had the power of ordinary flames, they were burned regardless of resistance and defense. Not only Kyle was stunned, but even the surrounding soldiers and officers were in shock at this moment, staring blankly at the burned Hulk who fell to the ground. Roar! The Hulk was injured and curled up on the ground, hugging into a ball on the burnt soil. His huge physique was like a deflated balloon. His body was shrinking towards the size of an ordinary person, and the green color of his whole body quickly faded. In the eyes of everyone, the Hulk turned back into Bruce Banner, with his upper body naked and his lower body wearing a pair of big pants. Kyle fell silent, knowing that the battle was over. He retracted the eternal flame and War God Axe into the card space. Banner. Outside the battlefield, when the soldiers lost their minds, Eliza broke free and rushed forward, knelt on the ground and hugged the unconscious Bruce, calling his name with tears in the rain. All soldiers, follow my orders and act. General Ross walked out, waved his hand, and the armed soldiers behind him swarmed forward, surrounding Bruce, Eliza, and Kyle. General Ross looked at Kyle and said respectfully and politely, "Mr. Kyle. Thank you very much for your help this time." Kyle nodded coldly and didn't say much. "Father, please let Banner go." Eliza looked at General Ross pleadingly while hugging Bruce. "Sorry." General Ross shook his head, and coldly issued an order to the surrounding soldiers: arrest the target prisoner, Bruce Banner, and return to the military base for immediate execution. Yes, the collective soldiers listened to the order and were about to take Bruce away. Eliza cried and tried to stop them, but she was still powerless. In the end, she could only cast her hopeful eyes on Kyle. "Mr. Kyle, please." Eliza knelt on the ground and begged, knowing that only the man in front of her was capable of stopping her. "Eliza." General Ross frowned, and said to Kyle apologetically, "Mr. Kyle, I'm sorry, my daughter is still young and not sensible." "Please, 30 years old, still young?" "It's okay." Kyle shrugged. Before General Ross smiled, he continued to add, "But Bruce Banner, you can't take it away, huh?" General Ross's face froze. At the same time, several armed soldiers stopped their hands at the same time, not daring to move Bruce on the ground. General Ross took a deep breath nervously, and asked later, "Mr. Kyle, why can't I take him away?" "Because I want to take him away." Kyle looked at him calmly, and said as a matter of course, "By the way, I am now the General Counsel of S.H.I.E.L.D. staff to contact S.H.I.E.L.D." General Ross' face changed slightly. Of course he knew about S.H.I.E.L.D., which was an independent and mysterious department that was not restricted by the United States. It was directly managed by the United Nations, and its duties and powers were very concentrated. In the United States, the local military generally cooperates with S.H.I.E.L.D. if it is an ordinary S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. General Ross, as an admiral, can still ignore Bruce and forcefully arrest him. But the other party is Kyle. Which personal identity of Kyle is not much bigger than the General Counsel of S.H.I.E.L.D. Ross sighed secretly, and said in a low voice, "Then, leave it to S.H.I.E.L.D. for the specific situation, and I will negotiate with them." Kyle nodded and patted his palms. As if following his call, a faint beam of light broke through the sky, deliberately avoided the soldiers, and fell on Kyle and Bruce respectively. "That's..." General Ross raised his head in amazement, and at a height of tens of meters, the bottom outline of a starfighter could be vaguely seen. "Goodbye first," Kyle said calmly, and Bruce's body was slightly suspended, and they were going to fly to the fighter cabin in the sky. "Mr. Kyle," Eliza stopped him and asked eagerly, "Can I go with Banner?" "Eliza, you are not allowed to go," General Ross said with anger. "It doesn't matter," Kyle thought for a while, then smiled lightly and said, "Ross, I will let someone look after your daughter to make sure she comes back safely." As soon as Kyle raised his finger, the beam of light covered Eliza's body. The three of them were wrapped in the beam of light and accelerated to float towards the interior of the cabin, as if they were absorbed and swallowed by the fighter plane. The tail flame sprayed out, and the fighter turned around in the air, turning into a stream of light at a high speed and returning towards New York. "General, what should we do now?" Watching the fighter plane leave, an armed soldier asked in surprise. "What else can I do?" General Ross's beard trembled slightly, and he looked around. Seeing the lawn changed beyond recognition under the baptism of artillery fire and divine flames, as well as the dead and wounded soldiers. He felt like losing his wife and losing his army, so he sighed helplessly and said, "Rescue the wounded, clean up the battlefield." Chapter 252 Top Fighter. It's strange to say. The Hulk was transformed from Bruce's anger, but the Hulk suffered extensive burns under the eternal flame. After turning back into Bruce, the burns on his body disappeared. Although Bruce was still in a coma, his slightly curly hair was still there, and his bare upper body was white and tender, as if it was really not him who had gone through a battle before. Hulk. Inside the cabin, Kyle squinted his eyes as he looked at Bruce in Eliza's arms. Hulk and Bruce coexist, a bit like Venom and him, although they share one body, they are not the same creature. Since Bruce was not burned, it also saved Kyle a lot of time. He ordered Weiss to control the fighter plane to return to the Regency building in New York, and let it send notification messages to two places. One is the S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters, and the other is the Stark building. When the starfighter landed on the roof of the Emgren building like a silver streamer, there was already a red-haired woman standing on the roof in advance and waiting. Kyle came out of the cabin and looked up, whoever it was, the Black Widow Natasha in front of him. Patriarch. Seeing Kyle, Natasha immediately knelt down on one knee to salute. While she represents the identity of the deputy director of S.H.I.E.L.D., she is also a member of the Carl family, and is now an elite spy of the Unnatural Agency. Come so fast, Kyle was a little surprised. "Your battle at Culver University has been reported to S.H.I.E.L.D. I came here early to wait, and I happened to see your message." Natasha smiled charmingly. Seeing Eliza push the unconscious Bruce off the plane in a wheelchair, she said curiously with beautiful eyes, "He's just..." "Yes. Doesn't the new alliance require high-end combat power?" "This is the candidate I recommend." Kyle shrugged and said, "Let's go to the conference hall first." DeHeo building, conference hall. Kyle sat on the main seat, and Yutong stood behind him, kneading his shoulders that had become tense due to the battle with his slender hands. After he personally told Bruce's girlfriend, Eliza, that Bruce would be fine, Eliza agreed to leave the conference hall, leaving Bruce, who was still in a coma, in the hall. Natasha looked at Bruce carefully, curious that the young professor who had no sense of danger at the moment was actually the green-skinned monster that made the armed forces helpless. The few people didn't wait for long, when an arc-shaped glimmer of light suddenly flashed in the sky outside the side-to-side floor-to-ceiling window, and it could be seen that an Iron Man with gold and red paint was approaching extremely fast, hovering just outside the window. Boom boom. The Iron Man knocked on the glass window, and with a daylight lamp on his chest, he opened the window and walked into the conference hall, where he sat on one of the sofa chairs very familiarly. Due to the titanium alloy steel coat, the heavy soft leather sofa collapsed obviously. Tony, seeing this, Kyle shook his head helplessly. Since Tony revealed his identity as Iron Man, he has been nestled in the studio all day. He doesn't even like to drive a sports car when he goes out on some occasions on weekdays. He wears an iron suit and flies all over the city. Godfather. I just came out of the studio and didn't change clothes, so I'll just wear this clothes for the meeting. Picking up the helmet, Tony showed a tired face with a smile. In this way, the newly built Avengers will basically have all the members. Tony's eyes fell on Bruce, who was still unconscious, similar to Natasha, and asked in surprise, "He's the Hulk?" "It doesn't look like it. He will transform." Kyle smiled, and glanced at the digital watch on his left wrist. "Weiss, can you wake him up?" The watch automatically fell off the wrist, fell on the smooth floor of the hall, unfolded in irregular mechanical form, and turned into a small robot. "Hello everyone, I am the Master's personal butler, Weiss." The robot is quite a gentleman, bowing and saluting all around. Cough. On the table, the flickering light of the steel helmet activated, sending out a special greeting from Jarvis. Wissy and Jarvis are not acquainted with each other. Under everyone's surprised eyes, Weiss jumped up to Bruce's feet, put his hands on his bare skin, and quickly diagnosed, he is not injured, but he is still a little confused, so he is in a coma. In this case, you just need to call it on. After finishing speaking, its small mechanical arm actually sent out electric shocks, and the weak electric arc was transmitted to Bruce's body, causing his body to twitch continuously in physiological response. "Don't roast me," Bruce exclaimed, his eyes widened suddenly, and his face was still full of horror. "Look, it's done." Weiss spread his hands and stepped aside. "Where am I? Who are you?" Bruce looked around blankly. The modern and tall conference hall, as well as the silver-haired youth, the woman in leather clothes, and the half-length Iron Man were all watching, forcing him to ask 3 times in a daze. Kyle said calmly, "Meeting for the first time?" "No, I have already met with another you twice, and I have also called you twice." "The other me? You fought the Hulk?" "It's still safe and sound." Bruce was taken aback. He looked at Kyle, surprised, but felt that the silver-haired young man in front of him looked very familiar. "By the way, it looks like a sculpture of a figure at Culver University." Bruce trembled all over and said in disbelief, "Are you a symbol of peace? A real person?" Kyle nodded calmly. "I have really become a living fossil, and everyone on the earth is shocked when they see it." "Ahem. Professor Banner, you and I should have met before, but now I forgot." Tony coughed lightly. He was also helpless in his heart. As long as there was an occasion with the Godfather, he had to take the initiative to create a sense of presence. Bruce was conscious, looked at him and suddenly said, "Yes. You and I met at the scientific discussion meeting 5 years ago. You are the chairman of Stark Industries, Mr. Stark. But why are you wearing a suit iron coat?" "Well," Tony scratched his head in embarrassment. He couldn't say he was used to pretending to be cool. Natasha crossed her legs, and finally said, You definitely don't know me. I am Natasha Carr, the current deputy director of S.H.I.E.L.D. symbol of peace, Stark Industries, S.H.I.E.L.D. Bruce became more and more surprised, frowning, and asked the biggest question in his heart, "Why am I here?" "You have to ask the Hulk in your body." Natasha smiled, and explained with her red lips lightly parted, "You just became the Hulk and fought with the owner Kyle at the University of California. Then defeated and reverted to a human body. Before the army wanted to arrest you, the owner Kyle brought you here first." The amount of information is a bit large. Bruce's brains turned sharply, and he looked at a few people nervously. "Then what do you want to do to me?" "What to do? It depends on your next choice." Tony wanted to touch his chin, but just as he raised his hand, he realized that he was wearing a steel coat. He hurriedly lowered his arm and said softly, "We want to invite you to join a team, the Avengers." Kyle picked up his unfinished words, looking at the confused Bruce with flickering eyes. "Hulk, but throughout the world of Marvel, the Earth can use high-end combat power to suppress the situation." Chapter 253 Avengers Banquet. Team. Bruce froze. When he was attacked by gamma radiation 4 years ago, he would turn into Violent Hulk when he was angry. Once someone knows his true identity, the purpose is to research besides arresting him. Today is the first time someone wants to invite him to join the team. "There is a monster living in my body," Bruce said bitterly with a serious face. "It is precisely because you will become the Hulk that we will find you." Natasha smiled. "The Avengers, All they need are inhuman elites. The enemy the team has to contend with, Mr. Banner, you have to know that the people here are not ordinary people. Tony blinked and tapped his steel coat with his fingers. Bruce gritted his teeth and said, the transforming Hulk is a genetic disease. I have tried everything possible to cure it and return to normal life. The hall fell silent for a moment. The strength of the Hulk is strong, but it is difficult to control. This is an absolute double-edged sword. Bruce, Kyle suddenly made a sound, looked at him calmly and said, why do you think the Hulk is a disease? It's not a slanted mutant evolution. When Bruce heard this, he lowered his head, sweat dripped from his forehead. The Hulk is a monster who has lost himself. How could it be a benign evolution? You can think about it. If there is no Hulk, can you still sit here and talk to us intact? Kyle said sharply. Bruce fell silent, nodded awkwardly and said, I have to admit, I have indeed been saved countless times by the Hulk I hate. That's it. Kyle looked at him and said bluntly, you just don't want to face the other side of your superpower, treat it as a symptom of a disease, and constantly want to heal it, control it, and kill it. How can it not be angry and violent? Bruce was speechless. Kyle shook his head secretly. This is the public thinking that humans on Earth cannot reverse in a short time. It is a social experience formed since ancient times that the minority obeys the majority and seeks common ground while rejecting differences. One day, you will become a Superman and live in human society. Instead of being proud of your superiority because of your superpowers, you will worry about being rejected by others and want to make a shell to disguise yourself as an ordinary person. Bruce Banner is a highly educated scientist, but he still can't ignore the eyes of the people around him. He can't bear the ugliness and horror of his mutated Hulk, and he struggles with it day and night. More importantly, there is no suitable environment and identity for him to survive in the sun. Mr. Banner, you have to think clearly. Natasha stared straight at Bruce, and said in a deep voice, even if you heal yourself now and no longer become a Hulk, you will still be labeled as a Hulk for the rest of your life. It lost control of the crimes it committed, and it will always be on your shoulders. Simply put, if it wasn't for us, you would have been imprisoned in the military prison now. Given your danger, it would probably be at least a life sentence, Tony added. It seems I have no choice. Bruce smiled wryly. He finally understood that he had already been thoroughly understood. He said it was a choice, but in reality he had no choice at all. This is an opportunity at a turning point in your life. On behalf of S.H.I.E.L.D., Natasha promised with a smile, the Avengers, but the first team of heroes on Earth, will only deal with the crisis of foreign enemies that threaten the survival of mankind. As long as you being able to join us, the Hulk will eliminate a series of crimes you are currently carrying. Bruce's eyes lit up slightly. This promise is too lethal to his current situation. Kyle shrugged, knowing the meeting was almost over. Hit a stick, and then give a candy to eat. This trick is really tried and tested. Bruce had a look of embarrassment on his face. I never thought of destroying or killing people, and I always insist on making scientific contributions to the world, but I can't control the transformed Hulk. Don't worry. Everyone in this battle will have the means to suppress the runaway Hulk in the future, Kyle said with confidence, crossing his arms. He himself has proved with practical actions that the Eternal Flame is believed to be a great shadow of the Hulk. Yutong's thoughts are extremely powerful, and he can control the minds of others a little bit. Hulk, who is mentally weak, really doesn't know how the two will fight. Tony doesn't have to worry, as long as he is given enough time and integrated with Banner's technological knowledge. The anti-Hulk armor is specially made to suppress the Hulk. As for Natasha, everyone knows what Black Widow does. Bruce felt relieved, sighed softly and said, then I'll try my best. That's it. Natasha was delighted. In this way, even if Kyle does not appear, the Avengers still have enough high-end combat power. Natasha directly took out her mobile phone, dialed, gave a few stern and domineering instructions, then hung up the phone and said indifferently, okay, Bruce Banner, your charges have been cancelled from the file. It's that simple. Bruce opened his mouth wide. Otherwise, what do you think? Calm down. You will be even more shocked by things in this team in the future. Natasha gave him a white look. The Avengers, with the entire S.H.I.E.L.D. as the logistics, summoned superheroes as core members. Its nature is a powerful team beyond the mundane. It's all over. Let's have a meal here by the way. Godfather, Tony gave a suggestion, leaning back on the back of the sofa, and the weight completely crushed the sofa under his crotch. He touched his belly, only to find the hard steel shell. Kyle nodded and said, Yutong, let someone prepare lunch. After half an hour, A luxurious table was arranged in the hall, with fine wines and delicacies. According to the private reception, the waiters were all female members of the Carl family. It's also the equivalent of the Avengers' first banquet. Bruce was obviously very hungry. He didn't care about Western food etiquette and teaching teachers, so he took half a roast chicken and ate it directly. His girlfriend, Eliza, looked worried and patted him on the back, helping. Tony, who changed into a suit, put on a white napkin, and the gentleman elegantly cut the meat on the plate with a knife and fork. Kyle had eaten just now, sitting on the main seat, only tasting the fine wine in the goblet. Yutong was sitting with a wine bottle, poured half the amount for him when the empty glass was empty, and Mima looked at him with a smile. Natasha was so excited that she half wanted to call Hawkeye and ask him to come and have a few drinks with her. In this beautiful and peaceful atmosphere, Weezy suddenly made a beeping sound of communication. "Master, there's news from General Ross." Weiss jumped onto the corner of the dining table and reminded. "What news?" Kyle asked in surprise. "Isn't it over? The Hulk has popped up on a busy main street in California and is now wreaking havoc on the streets," Weiss reports. "What?" As soon as this sentence came out, all eyes in the hall immediately fell on Bruce. "What?" Bruce was puzzled, and pointed to his nose, with half a piece of greasy chicken leg still in his mouth. Chapter 254 All Villains. Conference Hall. "Hulk, did you make a mistake?" Bruce put down the drumstick, his face serious. "He won't take this blame." Kyle frowned, thinking of the point, and asked, "Bruce, has your serum leaked to the outside world?" "Serum?" Bruce was stunned. Under the gaze of several people, cold sweat gradually came out of his forehead, and he nodded hurriedly and said, "I remembered. Some time ago, I did express the serum to a scientist friend. Please ask him to help. I work on deciphering the Hulk gene. Quick, deliver." Tony twitched his lips. "That's not the point." Natasha glanced at him and moaned. "Could it be that a second Hulk was born?" "Weiss, you connect to the military camera over there. Let us see the situation over there," Kyle said calmly. Wissy machinery turned its eyes, shining a bluish light, which was broadcast live together with a camera in the form of holographic projection. First came the chaotic screams. The footage recorded in the video is shaky, and it can be seen that it is a bustling central street, where cars are clogged and airtight. Countless pedestrians are running around, and at the end of the street, there is a huge green animal shadow wandering wantonly. The police and military forces began to evacuate pedestrians, and at the same time, Army green armored vehicles drove into the street, pushing forward to suppress. Boom! A bazooka shell accurately hit the green monster, and the flames and air burst suddenly. A huge palm sticks out from it, and it closes like a cattail fan, and the strong wind blows away the explosive waves with fire. A pair of brutal and cold animal eyes looked at the camera. Most of the people in the conference hall gasped. It was a head resembling a Hulk, but its physique was half stronger. The whole body was bald even on the top of the head, and the sinister muscles and bones had protruded from the muscles, and there was a row of barbed bones and teeth on the back. The creature in front of him is far uglier and more tyrannical than the Hulk, like a cold-blooded monster from bloody hell. "Hate," Kyle muttered. Subduing the Hulk is much faster than the original plot, and it was supposed to prevent the appearance of the abomination, but Bruce's serum was leaked ahead of time. Weiss, start work. Kyle didn't think too much. After drinking the wine in the glass, he stood up from the main seat, and the venom card was quietly held between his fingers. "Godfather, I just have time, so let me go with you and test the recently improved steel coat." Tony raised his hand, looked at the abomination in the video, and said with a little interest. "Okay," Kyle nodded. Just as the two were walking upstairs, Bruce stood up suddenly and made a request. "I'll go with you too." "Are you sure?" Natasha looked at him in surprise. "Now the Hulk is too uncontrollable. If it adds more chaos, the consequences will be unimaginable." As deputy director of S.H.I.E.L.D., she had to make that a priority. "I'm sure." Bruce took out a tissue, wiped off the oil stains on his mouth, and said seriously, "It's because of the product of my serum, and it's my duty to stop its atrocities. And if I can't adapt to transforming into a Hulk, then I will join the Avengers are useless, too. It doesn't matter. If it gets out of control, you can't beat me to suppress it together." Kyle's casual sentence made the whole hall quiet for a moment, and Tony and others felt more at ease in their hearts. "This is so reliable." "Okay. Then I will go together," Natasha thought for a while and said. "In this case, is it the first action of the Avengers?" Tony couldn't help laughing. "Let's go then." Kyle summoned venom, walked ahead, and led everyone to the rooftop. California. Bustling Main Street. Boom boom boom. The cars on the road were like plastic toys, and the haters picked them up and threw them around, hitting the buildings and causing bursts of partial explosions, with flames and thick smoke everywhere. Around, the bullets and artillery shells of the military troops poured out concentratedly, falling on the green bone shell and bouncing off as many as possible. Hate glanced at it coldly, picked up the roadside car continuously, and smashed it in the direction of the army, covering half of the street with blasting flames. Peace symbol, come out, Hate roared hoarsely. That's right, it's Semabu. That world-class top soldier, the new super soldier with genetic enhancement, and now the abomination injected with Hulk serum. 2 consecutive serious injuries, metamorphosis in the trough. The fusion of the super soldier and the Hulk gene, now it can no longer turn back into a human being, but it feels that its body contains infinite power. A symbol of peace, the abomination repeatedly growled, and was about to empty the army, when a familiar and flat voice suddenly came from behind. Are you looking for me? It froze, and then turned around abruptly. Kyle, who was wearing a hooded leather jacket and had silver hair, was standing less than 5 meters away from it, with a pair of dark wings shrinking from his back. You're really here? Hate laughed sarcastically. Here to take you on your way, Kyle said calmly. I am now. Are you still sure to win? Hate casually picked up the car next to him, raised it above his head, and was about to smash it at Kyle. Who said I want to fight you one-on-one? Kyle stood motionless with an idiot look in his eyes, without any intention of avoiding it. Chi-chi. At this moment, 2 dazzling lasers landed on the car first, causing the car to explode early at the hands of the abomination. Withdrawing his hands, he shook his head in disgust. The back of his head was a little blackened by the nearby blast. Who? It looked around angrily. Godfather, you are so fast. The Iron Man fell from the sky above the street, landed on the road with a bang, and stood side by side with Kyle. His raised hands were accumulating dazzling lasers, aimed at the abomination in front of him, and reminded politely, green-skinned monster, please raise your hideous fleshy claws. Who are you? Hate continued to ask in a cold voice. You can call me Iron Man, we are the Avengers. By the way, there is another member right away. Before the Iron Man finished speaking, Bruce's wailing came from far and near in the sky. Crack. Bruce fell in free fall and hit the concrete floor between Kyle and Iron Man, creating a human-shaped pit. Hate, Kyle. Iron Man covered the mask with his hands, not looking at the deep pit, and said with a little embarrassment, if I didn't say the last sentence, I don't know him. Crack. The ground trembled slightly, and the fissure in the human-shaped deep pit was expanding, and a thick green hand protruded from it. The Hulk crawled out of it. The hair on his head hadn't healed yet, and it was a little burnt black. It let out an angry roar with a violent breath, and smashed the Iron Man standing side by side with a punch. But when the Hulk looked to the right, with a calm face, Kyle suddenly lost its terrifying arrogance, and a humanized expression of extreme fear appeared on its face. It is afraid of being burned by the eternal fire. Call out. Iron Man flew crookedly back to the field, avoiding the Hulk, and stood cautiously on Kyle's left. Then let's get started. Kyle spread his hands, and from his chest, a layer of tough dark cuticle emerged, extending to his limbs and neck to cover his whole body. Dark Demon, Hulk, and Iron Man. All villains. Glancing with disgust, looking at the strangely shaped 3 people, for some reason, his heart swelled to conceit, and a strong sense of foreboding emerged. I have something to do at home, please take a chapter off. Chapter 255 The worst villain in history. Compared with the Hulk, the abomination seems to have evolved to be more powerful and perfect. But in Kyle's view, the evolutionary route of the abomination has completely gone astray. The Hulk itself is on the verge of vicious mutation. Fortunately, it is divided into 2 unrelated personalities. The human personality and the Hulk personality are in a certain state of balance, driving the 2 to check each other to maintain balance. And Hate, all the genes in the body have been deformed, no longer have a human personality, and can no longer turn into a normal human being, and the body and mind are completely reduced to a cold-blooded monster out of control. After defeating the Hulk, Kyle didn't need to test his combat power through extreme hatred, so he chose to join forces with the Hulk and Iron Man, just to quell the disputes that caused the turmoil as soon as possible. Quick fight. Clenching his left fist, Kyle's scarlet eyes shone brightly, and the dark muscle of his left fist quickly swelled into a hammer. Full coverage of venom, heavy hammer form. Before he even started, the Hulk rushed out uncontrollably, with 2 jets of hot air from his nostrils, and his open palms pressed against those who hated fighting. Kyle shrugged his shoulders, his wings trembled, and the dark figure disappeared from the spot, leaving only a white whirlpool on the ground. Supersonic assault. Hate's self-confidence is not inferior to the Hulk, but slightly superior, but just when it is about to push the Hulk to the ground, it suddenly feels cold on the back of its neck. Bang! Accompanied by the heavy hammer from top to bottom, the back of Hate's head was hit by a powerful hammer, and the concrete floor on which the soles of his feet stood could not bear the pressure, and it collapsed inch by inch to half a meter. Kyle appeared behind it, his body suspended at a low altitude, and the heavy hammer in his left hand was still in the posture of hammering down. Like being hit with a sap. Hate rolled his eyes, his ears rang loudly, and his head became dizzy for about half a second. In this half a second, the Hulk had seized the initiative to wrestle back, bend its powerless arms, and pushed its huge physique head onto the ground. Before the hatred came back to his senses, the Hulk sat straddling its thick waist, roaring in anger and excitement, and pounded heavily on his chest with his clenched fists. Faced with this situation, even the hatred wanted to say something rude. Its ferocious blood-plated mouth just opened, and the Iron Man flew across the air beside him at a high speed, and then 2 bright laser beams pierced through the air. With perfect timing and angles, the laser plunged straight into the black throat of the abomination. Hate suddenly opened his bloodshot pupils, closed his mouth subconsciously, and burped black smoke. Then came another hammer from Kyle, this time on its temple. It has to be said that the heavy hammer is obviously capable of facing the front, but now it is used as a boring brick for sneak attack. It makes the enemy extremely depressed and disgusted. As if it came from Kyle's bad taste, he, who has always been the main attacker, chose the semi-assisted route at this moment. The stun effect. Hulk's fist, Iron Man's laser, continued to fill the gaps in the battle. All this happened in the blink of an eye. Facing the siege of the 3 villains, let alone fight back in hatred. Before he even uttered a complete sentence, he was pushed to the ground and beaten violently without any suspense. On the edge of the battle area blocked by the military, armed soldiers with a series of hot weapons, as well as General Ross who rushed over, looked at the scene in front of them, stunned and messed up in the wind. A moment ago, ignoring the army and the powerful abomination that ravaged the streets, he arrogantly shouted for the symbol of peace to come and fight. In the next moment, the abomination made the Dark Demon, Hulk, and Iron Man rub against the ground collectively, unable to even stand up under the intensive attack. The entire street area was roaring and trembling, shaking and dusty. Hulk's fists and Kyle's heavy fists were like hammers, parrying against the abomination, as if they were hammering steel, bombarding and beating non-stop in every howl beneath the ground. 2 blinding lasers burst, prompting the howl to turn into a whimper of pain. This is no longer a battle, but a large-scale torture scene. The road where the battle was taking place was constantly collapsing, and the water pipes and the ground within 10 meters burst. After a loud roar, the road collapsed to reveal a large hollow hole. The hatred disappeared into the hole like a relief. Kyle, the Hulk, and Iron Man surrounded the entrance of the landslide with a triangle, and the 3 stared at each other. Oops, too much force. Crack. Starting from the entrance of the cave, a crack appeared in the center of the road, and the crack was still extending rapidly outward. It's hatred. That guy is actually digging a tunnel underground, trying to escape by relying on the soil. Tony, Kyle yelled. Understood. Iron Man is so smart, he knows his intentions without Kyle's explanation. It put its hands close to its thighs, and the engine roared on the palms and soles of the steel coat. After circling at a low altitude, it accelerated and rushed into the large hole in the ground, chasing the abomination from the ground. Spreading his wings, Kyle soared into the sky, and the Hulk followed the cracks one by one and launched a chase. Not only is it durable, but its vitality is too tenacious. Kyle thought about it. The state of the heavy hammer in his left hand faded. He swung his right hand into the void, and an item card was drawn out and held between his fingers. He looked down and said, "The big green guy." After Tony forced it out of the ground, "You help control it, roar." The Hulk was running wildly, roaring with dissatisfaction. Even Bruce himself couldn't control it, let alone let it obey the combat instructions. Shoo. Kyle summoned the entity, and a golden fire plate appeared on his hands, and the flame in the fire plate was burning as always. The Hulk's roar stopped abruptly, his neck shrank down, and the anger in his green eyes was replaced by panic. At this time, It recalled the fear of being roasted by eternal fire. Boom! The ground trembled slightly, as if the Iron Man had met the abomination underground. Kyle stopped above the ground of the epicenter, holding the golden fire plate in both hands, waiting for Tony to force the abomination out of the ground. After the appearance of the eternal flame, the Hulk became inexplicably silent, and there was no tendency to lose control of his anger. Boom! The ground suddenly split open amidst the tremors, and as gravel and dust flew up all over the sky, a figure popped out from under the ground in embarrassment. The Kyle was in the air, with his hands raised high, and was about to put the fire plate on the figure that was forced out, but the figure stopped in the air with its own flying ability. Iron Man looked at the fire plate, which was less than half a meter away, startled, waved his hands embarrassingly and said, "Godfather, it's me." Kyle silently retracted the fire plate, and his scarlet eyes looked coldly at the ground again. The Hulk raised his big feet, and suddenly trampled on the cracks in the ground. The ground with a radius of 10 meters collapsed instantly, and an invisible shock wave buzzed and spread underground. The earth was shaken by an earthquake, and a gap exploded in the ground again, and a huge green figure was forced to jump out of it. Kyle didn't hesitate this time. Facing the figure, he picked up the golden fire plate and covered its head. Chapter 256 Return from the Frozen, Captain America. Hade is very depressed. God seems to have been playing with him. Originally, as the top soldier in the world, he received a call from the general and wanted to shine in the task of arresting the target hostage. As a result, he encountered the Hulk, who had just appeared and was seriously injured and dying. After getting the super soldier potion, he transformed into a new super soldier after being seriously injured, and went to the Hulk confidently to avenge his shame. As a result, after being punched by the Hulk, he was seriously injured again and was on the verge of death. Finally, he found the Gamma Lab, injected the Hulk serum, and became an abomination with endless power. He regained his confidence and wanted to knock down the peace symbol and the Hulk to prove himself. As a result, before it could show itself, it was pushed to the ground by Kyle and others and beat it violently. It is said that when God closes your door, he will open a window for you, but what you don't know is that there is a cliff outside the open window. When I escape from this city, I will come back and settle accounts with you one by one. Abomination dug a hole with both hands, covered with hair and wounds, couldn't stop thinking angrily. Everyone knows what happened next. Zizzy. The golden fire plate covered the head of the abomination, and Kyle flapped his wings back, pressing it and hitting the ground below. In just a split second, the eternal flame raged out from the plate, covering the loathing's strong and huge body along the body surface. The seemingly ordinary flames, when the loathing body burned, a creepy and destructive aura gushed out. Tap tat tat. The Hulk turned around and ran away, keeping a safe distance of tens of meters, and sat in the back of the bus with lingering fear. Iron Man was also in shock. He took away his steel mask with his left hand, and the engine on the sole of his foot fell to the ground with the engine turned off. He took a few steps forward, looking at the hatred that was wrapped in eternal flames, and kept screaming. Initially hitting and resisting, Kyle pressed the bottom of the golden fire plate hard, pressed the opponent with the plate, and used the plate to block the raging eternal flame. In front of the eternal fire exuding a destructive aura, even he, the god of Vulcan, felt extremely hot because of his uneasiness. Surrounded by the eternal flame, the hatred begged for mercy powerlessly, but soon even the begging for mercy became weak, until the silence could only hear the sound of burning flames. Kyle reckoned that the time was almost up, so he held up the golden fire plate and held it up. The eternal flame automatically flowed back, and returned to the gold plate as compressed as possible. On the original ground, only a huge and terrifying Fenian was left, and some black ashes were scattered with the wind. A powerful creature with a rare purple card, the Abomination, was burned to ashes by the eternal fire. With a sudden jump in his heart, Kyle realized for the first time that the eternal flame is definitely not an artifact that he can control now. If he uses it improperly, he will even play with fire and set himself on fire. Don't burn. The flame was still burning as before, but from the fire core in the golden fire plate, there was a faint sound of disgust and pain. Kyle's face changed slightly, and he stared directly at the eternal flame on the plate. A loathing face could be seen flashing past in the swaying flames, a bit like a desperate ghost in hell begging for mercy with its mouth wide open. Hateful souls, in eternal fire. Kyle flashed this idea, and immediately turned the eternal flame into a card, and stored the card back into the card space. The eternal flame is too mysterious, we should study it carefully in the future. That monster, is it dead? Tony looked at Fen Ying on the ground and said. Obviously, the dead can't die anymore. Kyle looked around and asked strangely, where's the Hulk? It seems to be hiding. Tony spread his hands. At this, behind the car more than 10 meters away, Bruce waved helplessly at the two of them with his upper body bare and his slacks slipping down. Kyle turned around and said calmly, if you don't know him, let's go. I agree. Tony nodded approvingly, and put on the steel mask at this time. New York, a modern building on Center Avenue, a single room isolated and hidden somewhere. No matter the size of the room, the decoration style, the bed and chair furniture, etc., the rooms are all decorated in the old Western style. Everything here seems to be still before 1945. Single bed in single room. A handsome tall blonde young man was lying on it, wearing short sleeves and trousers. His brows were full of righteousness, but his body and mind were still in a long and leisurely sleep. He is in the decorated room of the old era, without the slightest sense of disobedience, just like a character in the historical picture scroll. The cool breeze blows in from the window, and the warm golden sunlight falls into the room, making the room brighter and more plentiful. The three-blade fan was still turning slowly and silently, and the antenna radio on the old table began to rustle. The two were still confronting each other, and they moved together. He stepped forward, raised his hand, stabbed straight, and the long sword drew an arc. The lieutenant lowered his body, lowered his knees, raised his shield, and held it against the long sword. On the radio, the announcer was talking about news reports in an exaggerated tone. Frowning slightly, the blond young man opened his eyes, got up from the bed and landed on the ground, looking around the room in confusion. The fierce battle between the two continues. The radio was still playing, and the blond young man's eyes fell on it, and his breathing became slightly rapid. Before he fell into coma, his teammates calmly exhorted him. The uncontrolled roar of fighter planes, the cracking of seawater and icebergs, memory revived his brain like a tidal wave. Squeak. The door opened, and a woman in an old officer's uniform walked into the room, and greeted him softly. Good afternoon, Captain. Where's this? The blond youth breathed heavily, his brows were furrowed, and his body muscles tensed subconsciously. Before the woman could respond, the radio announced, sword and shield collided, and the two were tied. The blond-haired young man couldn't help standing up, his eyes shot majestic and sharp, and said in a deep voice, I remember, this was a battle between me and my comrades in the military base, but it didn't end in a draw, but he won. I noticed that the broadcasting of the radio was falsified, and the woman's eyes were dodging. The blond young man quickly stood up, as vigorous as a cheetah, kicked the door of the room violently, and rushed out. He wants to escape here and join Kyle and Carter in the military base. The wooden door was broken, and outside the single room was a large modern hall on the first floor, where many employees in black suits came and went. The original room is like an isolated research room, everything inside is fake. When the blond young man rushed to the hall, all eyes immediately fell on him. Emergency alert, attention to all agents. The intelligence broadcasts around the hall sounded, and the agents were startled, and rushed towards the blond young man. Clap, clap, clap. The blond young man rushed out of the gate, waving his strong arms, and any agent who approached was knocked to the ground 2 or 3 times. No one can stop him. The blond young man rushed out of the branch building called Shield and fled to the bustling street. The sound of car horns is everywhere. There are many modern buildings, and the colorful big screen is singing and dancing. The future scene that has never been seen before comes into view. He was stunned, and stopped at the bustling intersection. Thanks to the leader of Sankey Mutual Entertainment Lee Yifei for the reward. Please wait for my update CAC in the new January. I ask book friends to give monthly support. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelists. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 257. Welcome to the 21st century. The starfighter landed on the roof of the Emgren building, and Kyle walked out of it first, followed by Yutong and the members of the Alliance to leave the cabin. Bruce and his girlfriend chose to stay in California directly, so only Tony and Natasha returned. Godfather. Over there in my studio, the ion accelerator is still under construction, so let's take a step ahead, Tony said while holding his helmet. Kyle nodded in agreement. Tony immediately put on the steel helmet, and Iron Man flew out from the roof of the building, flying at supersonic speed, and returned in a straight line to the Stark Industrial Building more than 10 kilometers away. Natasha hesitated for a moment, and said hesitantly, "Patriarch, about Bruce Banner, I know what you're worried about." Kyle smiled and said thoughtfully, "You add a restriction. Within a week, Bruce must move to New York, okay?" Natasha's eyes lit up, and she immediately agreed. Although Bruce has joined the Avengers and rationalized his identity, no one can guarantee when the Hulk will come out. Once the Hulk ran away in anger and caused social turmoil, it would be the blame that S.H.I.E.L.D. must bear, but he can no longer be used as a prisoner to monitor the other party. He must grasp a certain degree. From the beginning to now, Natasha has been thinking about this issue, but she didn't expect Kyle to easily solve it with a single sentence. Yes, Bruce himself is in New York, and the Hulk can only be more peaceful and docile. After all, there is a symbol of peace in New York. Natasha looked at the man in front of her and secretly sighed. With the return of Kyle, not only the Carl family, but also S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Avengers seem to have a pillar, and they are full of confidence in everything they do. This is what others cannot give. Then I'll go to the headquarters of S.H.I.E.L.D. Natasha's words paused, but the communication phone in her leather pants pocket vibrated slightly, as if there was some urgent message from the bureau to report. Kyle waved his hand lightly and walked towards the elevator with Yutong. "I'm the deputy bureau," Natasha answered the phone. Soon, she seemed to hear an important message, and quickly put down the phone. "Patriarch. Please wait a moment." Kyle turned around in surprise, saw Natasha's beautiful eyes full of surprises, took a deep breath and said, "An old friend of yours has woken up. S.H.I.E.L.D. branch, lobby on the 3rd floor." For this trip, Kyle did not bring Yutong, but chose to come alone. Along the way, after becoming a god, the indifferent state of mind that has always been unreasonable and indifferent unexpectedly caused waves of burning emotion. Kyle suppressed the long-lost excitement in his heart, opened the main door of the hall and walked in. Looking at the sofa from the backlight of the window, he could see that Fury was chatting with a blonde young man. At the same time, the two also noticed that someone was coming. Their words stopped, and their eyes shifted to him. The blonde young man trembled and stood up from the sofa. He wanted to say 1,000 words, but in the end he just uttered helplessly, "Brother, I seem to have slept for a long time." "Yes, Steve, you're so sleepy." Kyle couldn't help laughing. In the past, it has been more than half a century. For Steve, I am afraid that before closing your eyes, it was still in the middle and late stages of World War II. On an out-of-control fighter plane, the two fought side by side against a Red Skull. But when he opened his eyes again, the world and people have changed beyond recognition. After so many years, Fury is old, but you are still the same, just your hair. Steve moved his eyes up, and his focus fell on Kyle's shiny silver hair. "You were lazy in sleep, but I didn't sleep until this day." Kyle spread his hands, making a rare joke, but this joke contained many difficulties. Since Steve crashed, he has suffered too many experiences, from the Earth to the universe, from modern times to modern times. "Hey, you two old comrades in arms, talk slowly. I'll get you some wine." Fury touched his chin, feeling that his existence was a bit redundant, so he found an excuse to exit the hall and closed the door by the way. The hall fell into silence. Kyle took a step, walked directly opposite to Steve, sat down on the sofa, and crossed his legs. Steve smiled and broke the silence and said, "I just learned something from Fury. I heard that you later ended World War II and became a symbol of peace." "The symbol of peace is just a title. I just did what I thought I should do." Kyle changed the subject and said calmly, "Besides, what you really want to ask me is probably not this matter, right?" Steve looked at him and said with a deep face, "Yes, about Agent Carter. I went to the date you mentioned." Kyle spoke succinctly. He paused, and continued, "I'm sorry for the rest. It's because I didn't notice that she was sick, and happened to leave the Earth due to my own physical problems." Steve's eyes were dim. His fists were clenched, and his nails were deeply sunk into the flesh of his palm. Kyle said softly, "Steve, I didn't fulfill your orders, guard Carter. If you blame me, I can give you a few blows. The main problem is me, so how can I blame you?" Steve sighed, and let go of his clenched fists. "I thought I could help her, protect her, and fulfill her wish." Pity. This sentence, "it's a pity," is full of bitterness and helplessness. Kyle fell silent, recalling Steve's confession before he died, as well as Carter's invitation to dance and goodbye, plus Steve's words now. He vaguely knew that he had done one thing wrong and missed some things. Those things, once missed, can no longer be made up and become permanent regrets in life. Inside the hall, two old men in their 80s and 90s, because of the past events, have been silently reminiscing for a long time. Kyle. I want to go to a few places. Steve's eyes brightened, and he said in a deep voice. Okay. I'll go with you. Kyle didn't ask any questions, so he agreed. This is the tacit understanding between the two. Decades later, has not changed. 5 minutes later, the main door of the hall opened, and Fury walked in with a bottle of wine. What about people? When he saw that the hall was empty, he was wondering when the violent roar of an engine suddenly came from outside the window. The entrance of the Shield Branch building. Two young men in leather jackets and jeans, wearing hats and sunglasses, each rode a modern motorcycle, accelerated one after the other, merged into the road, and left for an unknown distance. Fury, Patriarch and Captain. Natasha's report came from Fury's hidden earphone. Fury watched the motorcycle leave, and said calmly and forcefully, okay, let Kyle take him to adapt to the modern world. On the road, Kyle refueled at a high speed, caught up with a motorcycle approaching in front, and asked strangely, why use a motorcycle? Nowadays, it is very convenient to travel by plane. I still like motorcycles. I have a great sense of speed. Steve shrugged. His face was cheerful with the strong wind blowing on his face, and he put aside a lot of the depressed and sad mood just now. Okay, Kyle was speechless. Motorcycle speed, come on, he uses Venom's flight mode to fly a few blocks away. By the way, I forgot to tell you something. Kyle remembered something and said aloud. What? Facing Steve's question, Kyle replied calmly, welcome to the 21st century. Chapter 258. The two people of ancient and modern times. Suburban towns in New York. The main house of the Carter family seemed to have had an accident at this time. Members of the family branches of men, women and children, more than a dozen people gathered together. Their faces were sad, their eyes were reddish, and they were weeping in front of a dark wooden coffin. Boom. At this moment, there was the sound of a motorcycle engine outside the door, moving from far to near inappropriately, and finally it seemed to stop at the door of the big house. Is there any other child who hasn't arrived yet? A middle-aged man wiped away his tears and asked in surprise. The family members in the hall looked left and right, but couldn't think of a reason. Their eyes with tears fell on the door, where two tall figures were approaching. Excuse me, is anyone there? The leading young man asked inside. Who? Don't bother me if you have nothing to do. The middle-aged man was feeling sad, and responded bluntly. Is this Peggy Carter's home? The blonde young man walked to the door, took off his sunglasses, saw the funeral scene in the hall, and leaned against the door in shock. I said it all. Now, the middle-aged man stepped forward angrily, and was about to drive away the comers, but he was forcibly held by a young woman's arm. Father, wait, you are. Ellie Carter wiped away the tears on her face with her sleeves. Her hazy and wet eyes widened, and she looked at the handsome and upright blonde youth in front of her in shock. Compared with this symbol of peace, Steve is exactly the same as in the past. No matter in appearance, it is almost like a legend who came out of a war memorial film. Not only Ellie, but many people in the room also recognized the blonde young man, and opened their mouths in a daze. Ellie. Since you are here, it proves that we are not in the wrong place. As an indifferent voice sounded, another silver-haired young man who was traveling with him walked from behind the blonde-haired young man to the door of the house. Symbol of peace, Captain America. My God, isn't it a dream? Ellie was stunned and muttered to herself. Two war heroes who changed the pattern of World War II, in the same frame in the modern world historically. Are you having a funeral? Kyle raised his eyebrows lightly, feeling that the two of them came at the wrong time. Yes. My grandpa Muddy Carter, he passed away of natural causes this morning, and is now cremated, ready to be buried in a coffin, Ellie replied sadly. Maddie. Is that Peggy's younger brother? Steve asked with a sigh. He had heard Paige mention her brother before, when Maddie was still at school, and said it was very naughty, but in the blink of an eye, the other party has naturally aged and passed away. Yes, Ellie nodded sadly. Kyle and Steve looked at each other and understood each other's meaning. Steve said in a deep voice, let's see him off. By the way. Kyle nodded at the same time. All the people in the hall were startled, and even the sadness was gone, and the reporter Ellie was even more speechless intermittently. Sending two national heroes away for burial is not even the president of a country's ostentatious treatment. How could they know that this is love for the house, and it is also some way of making up for a certain woman by two old men? After half an hour, Kyle and Steve carried the wooden coffin on their shoulders and walked to the nearest cemetery with the Carter family. After completing the burial procedure, members of the Carter family stood collectively in front of the new grave, bowing their heads and weeping in silence. That's it. Kyle looked sharply at a place in the cemetery. There's a tomb there. The old tombstones are yellowed, and the surroundings of the tomb are covered with green grass and green plants, which looks like it has been around for some years. Ellie replied, "It's Grandma Page's grave." Kyle and Steve were silent for a while, and they came to the grave. So many years have passed, and even the stone tombstones of people have left traces of wind and rain for a long time. Only the smile of the beautiful woman in the black and white photos is still there. With tears in his eyes, Steve suppressed his emotions and began to sweep the weeds and dust from the grave. Kyle can't feel sadness. After so many wars, and his body becoming a god, the fragile sensibility of human beings has been weakened, and only the extremely tenacious human rationality remains strong. However, he still drew from the card space, and took out a bouquet of flowers that was still full of vitality, as well as a few bottles of top-quality spirits from the old era. "I remember when I was drinking with you before. When I was caught by Carter, I would reprimand you, where I seldom drink, mainly because you insist on me to accompany you. It was agreed to kill the Red Skull and go back to drink at the banquet together, but I still missed the appointment. It's not your fault, really." Kyle and Steve sat in front of Peggy's grave, chatting about the past of World War II, and picked up the bottle and poured spirits into their mouths. The spicy wine wets the collar, and the irritating eyes are red, revealing the true feelings. "Peggy, she likes you," Steve suddenly said loudly, drinking a little drunk. Kyle's heart trembled slightly. He opened his mouth, and could only say softly, "You're drunk." "I'm not drunk," Steve laughed, lying back on the grass, gurgling down his drink. "You're drunk." "I'm not drunk." Sure, I seem to be drunk." Sunset. In front of the cemetery, the two young men drank strong wine and talked about the past that no one could understand. After the members of the Carter family mourned silently, they began to leave the cemetery and return home, not daring to talk to Kyle and Steve. Halfway there, Ellie's father suddenly lowered his voice and said, "Tell me, is the man who killed Aunt Peggy the one just now?" Another older family member nodded. "It's possible. Otherwise how could it not have been made public at the beginning?" "Father, uncle." "What are you talking about?" Ellie, who was suffering from occupational diseases, approached and asked curiously like a baby. "About your Grandma Peggy." Ellie's father shook his head and said, "Your Grandma Peggy resigned from the army at a young age. How could she die of illness?" Back then, there was an ugly family secret that was unknown. Only the older generation in the Carter family know. "Grandma Peggy, didn't she die of illness?" Ellie almost exclaimed. "Of course not. It's not so much that she's sick. It's better to say that she damaged her body because of a certain man." Ellie's father stopped in the middle of speaking, unwilling to say more. "For a man," Ellie whispered, feeling like she had accidentally uncovered a family secret. The sun sets, and night falls in the cemetery. Kyle opened his eyes and used his divine power to dissolve all the remaining alcohol in his body. "It's time to go back," he patted Steve, who was lying on his side. "I just came to the first place, and there is the second." Steve shook his head, and gradually stood up soberly. "Then go to the second place." Kyle supported him with one hand, and the two walked out of the dark cemetery after a little while. The two motorcycles roared, the bright lights pierced the darkness, and they rushed side by side to the highway extending towards the city. Chapter 259 Return of the Hero. New York Central Plaza, War Heroes Memorial. In front of the museum, two stone statues of young men in combat uniform stood, one holding a sword and the other holding a shield, with their backs to each other, and their majestic eyes shot forward. After nightfall, the lights fall on the top of the statue, like a circle of sacred crowns. The musical fountain is located at the foot of the sculpture. Under the music of modern wars, the clear water is thrown rhythmically, and the performance sets off the exciting and passionate momentum. Many office workers, or foreign tourists, brought their families, young and old, to gather around the statue in twos and threes, stopping to look up. Two tall young men, a little sneaky, lowered their peaked caps. They carefully avoided the crowd in front of the gate and followed a steady flow of people into the memorial hall. "Come and see the war memorial that promotes my memory. Why should I do such a boring thing?" Caught in the crowd, Kyle felt bored for no reason. He glanced at Steve, who was in high spirits, and could only sigh helplessly, and walked into the museum with him. Hallway of the memorial. There are built-in screens on the walls on both sides, and the World War II propaganda film is continuously shown. The young man with a sword in a black suit and the young man with a shield in dark blue leggings are the protagonists, leading the soldiers and charging forward domination battle. This place is not for me. Kyle lowered the brim of his hat, afraid of being recognized by someone. Watching my promotional video like this, I always feel a kind of inexplicable shame. Steve watched it with gusto, and was even more taken aback by the modern color video, his eyes constantly showing the splendor of accepting new things. In front of a corner of the exhibition hall, there are lively crowds of tourists, and the video shows a photo of a short young man, accompanied by a voice-over explanation in Hangguan. Steve Rogers before the serum injection. He weighed 95 pounds and was 5 feet 4 inches tall. He failed to enlist in the army due to poor health many times post-serum, 240 pounds, Kyle, you're talking about me over there, Steve smiled and said in a low voice to Kyle. Kyle nodded, and the voice continued to float over there. Steve Rogers was selected to participate in an unprecedented project during World War II. He became the world's first super soldier and rescued thousands of soldiers and prisoners in his first operation, is Captain America, who represents the justice of the country. The legendary hero who dismantled the Hydra organization and saved the world. Steve's eyes brightened slightly. He patted Kyle's shoulder lightly, and said proudly like a child, how about it? I'm good, excellent. Kyle didn't want to hit his old friend, so he had to give him a thumbs up. Steve smiled, the previous sadness disappeared, and his fists were quietly clenched. This at least made him understand that although this road is lonely and difficult, as long as the world recognizes it as a heroic act, everything is worth it. The two continued to go deeper into the hall, arrive at another huge exhibition hall, where both photos and videos are based on darkness, and there is also a model pendant of a one-handed sword. Tourists gathered here were almost full. Kyle Dwarf, when he first entered the recruit base. He quickly emerged in the training and became a dazzling new star among the soldiers. He is the youngest major general in the United States and the greatest war hero of World War II. He not only disintegrated the Hydra organization, but also dominated the battlefield in many large-scale wars, saved and accelerated the return of the world to peace, and is known as a contemporary symbol of peace. The voice-over commentary came to the ears. Steve twitched the corner of his mouth far-fetchedly, and looked frustratedly at Kyle, who had his pockets in his side and looked indifferent. How do I feel? My limelight has been overwhelmed by you, Steve said depressed. You think too much? Kyle patted him on the shoulder in return, as a gesture of reassurance. In the War Memorial Hall, there are photos of important figures such as the Science and Strategy Department of the old era and the Roaring Commando. Kyle and Steve visited everywhere, as if to remember their lost youth, the era of war that was gradually forgotten by the world and buried far away. In the 21st century, it's a wonderful time of peace, seeing the end, Steve sighed softly. In the future, you may not think so, Kyle shook his head and said coldly, this world is tidied up and cleaned up, and many people will want to destroy it and mess it up. Steve fell silent, glanced at Peggy's photo on the wall for the last time, turned around and waved his hands and said, let's go, it's time to leave. Kyle nodded, and the two exited towards the entrance of the memorial hall. Walking to the corridor near the door, there was a sudden burst of screaming outside the door, and then people seemed to be forced to flow back into the museum. What are you doing? The uncle inside who wanted to go out was startled and roared angrily. Shut up. What responded to him was the violent abuse from several men outside the door. Just as the uncle was about to say something, a loud gunshot sounded like a warning, causing him to turn pale and back away in fright. Is this robbery? Steve asked in surprise, somewhat understanding the meaning of Kyle's words just now. It should be. Kyle couldn't complain. It should be said that New York is indeed the city of sin. However, if he chooses the war memorial to rob, I don't know if the robber boss has a wrong brain. In other words, the aura of a hero will attract robbers to commit crimes, which can be regarded as the default rule in hero movies. The two stopped in the middle of the corridor near the door, motionless, like two iron pillars. The terrified tourists passed by and hid in the hall of the memorial hall behind them. Give me all in. 5 robbers wearing black clothes and hoods, holding guns in both hands, drove the tourists into the hall and blocked the entrance of the memorial hall. The leader of the robbers stood in the corridor, glanced at everyone, and said sharply, "Hold your head in your hands, and squat down honestly. Hand over your belongings one by one." As soon as the words fell, the tourists squatted down in panic, and in a blink of an eye, there were only two young people standing conspicuously in the middle. "You two, don't you want to live?" The robber raised his eyebrows and pointed his gun. But the two of them didn't even look at him. They were discussing something in a low voice to themselves. "Am I coming, or are you coming?" Kyle asked with his hands still in his pockets, bored. "Let me do it. After lying down for so long. It's time to stretch your muscles." Steve shrugged. "Don't force me." The robber pointed his gun at Steve, and before he finished speaking, Steve moved suddenly. With a quick lunge, he rushed forward explosively. The robber leader reacted, subconsciously put his finger on the trigger, and was about to shoot. But Steve's speed was obviously faster. He leaned close to the robber's leader's armpit, stretched out his hands quickly, held the barrel of the gun with one hand, and twisted it into a twisted shape with the other hand. Boom! A gunshot rang out, and a light bulb on the ceiling of the hall shattered. Steve flipped his hands. The robber leader's scream was still in his throat, his body turned more than 180 degrees, and his head hit the smooth floor hard. "The action is not bad," Kyle made a comment, but yawned slightly sleepily. Chapter 260 Family Site, Frozen Land. "What happened? Go. Let's go in and have a look together." The other four robbers at the door heard the gunshots and rushed into the hall with their guns in hand. When they saw the boss lying unconscious on the ground, Steve had already rushed towards them like a cheetah. After more than 60 years of being frozen, Steve's physical fitness is not static. The body cells turn to the best state during hibernation, which tends to make the super soldier's physique reach its peak. Regardless of the five senses, strength, physique, speed, or reaction arc, all of them are nearly 10 times that of human beings. With an explosion of inhuman speed, a peaked cap detached from the top of his head. Steve didn't respond, and after getting close, he used his hands and feet together, displaying sharp and decisive fighting skills. In just a few seconds, the remaining four robbers didn't even have time to fire their guns, and they were completely overturned, kneeling on the ground in mourning, and the guns in their hands fell to the ground one after another. Until then, the peaked cap floated from the sky and fell to the ground. "During the war, you would have died on the battlefield a long time ago. Please cherish the present peaceful era." Steve snorted dissatisfiedly, and Ling Kong Fei kicked the last robber. The robber vomited blood, flew back a few meters away from the gate, wiped the floor in front of the gate with his back, rolled until he barely stopped at the foot of the stone statue. Really? Wiping the dust off his palms, Steve turned around and picked up the peaked cap from the ground. When he raised his head and saw Kyle with a helpless face, and the surprised tourists in the hall covering their mouths, he realized that his identity seemed to be exposed. "Kyle," Steve just opened his mouth, then stopped suddenly, and slapped his forehead in self-blame. Well now, both of their identities have been exposed. Kyle noticed the burning gazes behind him, so he couldn't help stepping forward, passed by Steve, and reminded him coldly, "Why don't you hurry up?" "Oh." Steve quickly followed him out of the memorial hall as if he had just woken up from a dream. The two appeared quickly, and quickly evacuated, leaving behind the robbers lying on the ground, seriously injured and unconscious. "If I'm not mistaken, the one just now seems to be Captain America, right? It's exactly the same as the one in the video. If you read it wrong, I guess I saw it wrong too. Wait, he seems to have called the guy Kyle. Should it be?" In the hall of the memorial hall, everyone looked at each other, and after a brief silence, they all chased outside the door frantically. Poor those robbers on the ground, suffered a second trample attack again. The two motorcycles continued on the road, merged into the main road of the city where the traffic flowed, and stayed away from the noisy war memorial behind them. It's still your quick reaction. If the people are surrounded, it will be troublesome to get out. Steve smiled bitterly at Kyle. "It's good to get used to it," Kyle shrugged and said calmly. "In the 21st century, after people eat and drink enough, bad people breed dirty and sinful ideas, and good people indulge in gossip on the information network." He added, "It is estimated that early tomorrow morning, your return and your appearance at the war memorial with me will quickly spread throughout the United States. Fortunately, it's not a bad thing." Steve breathed a sigh of relief. "It's hard to say." Kyle shook his head. "Who knows if those new media will add words like shock, private meeting, friend to the title. By the way, speaking of friends." Kyle refueled fiercely. The cylinder roared, and the motorcycle passed Steve immediately, and said softly, "You have been wherever you want to go. Now, I will take you to another place." Immediately, the motorcycle he was driving was speeding up, leading Steve out of the city. New York, the suburbs, the old castle of the Carl family. It was late at night, and two motorcycles broke into the secluded forest road, breaking the silence and darkness of the forest. They didn't stop until the courtyard of the castle manor, and the lights of the cars shone brightly on the wooden steps of the main building of the manor. "Kyle, where's it?" Steve looked around in surprise. His face suddenly changed, but there were two red spots from sniper rifles falling on him. And there was another shadow darting out of the darkness, approaching at a high speed. Steve was getting tense, so Kyle patted his hands and said coldly, "Okay, my guest." As soon as the words fell, the aiming red dot disappeared. At the same time, a middle-aged man wearing a butler uniform rushed forward, knelt down on one knee, and respectfully said to Kyle, "The housekeeper of the family site, Katu Aiden, has met the owner?" Kyle nodded, got off the motorcycle, looked up at the illuminated old manor, and said softly, "This place really hasn't changed, that is." The housekeeper stood up and said with emotion, "Since you left the earth and this place became a family site, Mrs. Lucy has not allowed us to renovate it. Even the surrounding Kazuki and the chair in the house are the same as the 60s, it's the same as it was a few years ago. You have worked hard staying here. When you return to the family base, you can receive 10 years of infinite formula medicine for free," Kyle said calmly. "Thank you, patriarch." The housekeeper was overjoyed. For 10 years, there are only 3 or 4 potions of the infinite formula. If you are not a black rank card disciple, you don't know how many family contribution points you need to redeem. "Take us to the old warehouse," Kyle continued. "Yes. This way, please." The butler led Kyle and Steve to the back of the main building of the manor, which was the old warehouse building. The gate of the old warehouse building, locked with iron chains and old locks, the upper door is covered with cobwebs and dust. "According to your order. Over the years, the warehouse has not been opened and used," said the butler. "Very good," Kyle nodded. Steve asked puzzledly, "Kyle, what are you bringing me to this warehouse for? Remember Bucky Barnes?" Kyle asked him back. Steve trembled all over, and said with a painful face, "How could I forget him? He fell into the mountains, rivers and snowy valleys in order to save me." He seemed to have reacted, and said anxiously, "Why did you mention him all of a sudden? Could it be that?" "That's right, Bucky is still alive." Kyle simply nodded and kicked the warehouse door. He only used half the force. The door was too old and corrupt. The door panel and the chain fell off in one piece, and flew into the inner warehouse room, kicking up billowing dust. "You said Bucky is still alive?" Steve was stunned, his eyes full of excitement and surprise. "Yes. Not long after the war ended. I met him in the Red House of the Soviet Union." Kyle turned on the switch in the room, walked into the warehouse, and talked about how Bucky was frozen and sealed. At that time, it was also a helpless move. Bucky was brainwashed and his memory was confused. He couldn't control his own body. In order to avoid being driven by others with instructions, he became a murder weapon. Kyle asked Howard to build a special freezer, iced Bucky in the basement of the old warehouse, and waited for one day to thaw him out and wake him up. Only Kyle and Howard knew about this matter, not even members of the Carl family. There was a frozen living person in the basement of the warehouse. And today, it's time to wake him up. Kyle stopped in front of the basement door. The door in front of him was a sealed and locked safety iron door, which could not be opened even by a small bomb. It could only be opened from the inside of the basement. "It's much more convenient to have a hanging ring." Kyle shook his head, stretched out his clenched right hand, and the venom liquid covered and wrapped the entire arm, transforming it into a black hammer. He pointed at the safety iron door and smashed it with a hammer. Violent demolition. Chapter 261 Winter Soldier, where did you go? The power of the heavy hammer explodes into dozens of tons of impact energy, and its power at close range is no less than that of a modern small missile. Boom. Like thunder on the ground, the entire old castle manor was shaken, the old warehouse building trembled and crumbled, and the sealed anti-theft door in the basement was exaggeratedly dented and cracked inward. After finishing all this, Kyle calmly withdrew his right hand, and the dark coat on his arm also faded in the blink of an eye, blending into the leather sleeve. The fellow butler was stunned, and looked at Kyle with even more fanaticism, just like a believer looking up at the God he has believed in all his life. Steve's focus was not on this. After the basement door was violently broken open, he faced the dust pouring out and rushed into the room impatiently. Kyle flipped on the light switch and followed him into the basement. But soon, the expressions of the two changed slightly. The basement room that has been covered with dust for more than half a century. Under the dim old electric light, there is indeed a rectangular parallelepiped freezing bin in the middle of the room, but all the wires connecting the freezing bin have been disconnected, and the door of the freezing bin is open facing the door, and there is no one in the room. Kyle, what's going on? Steve's pupils shrank, he turned around, and looked at Kyle in surprise. Kyle's face turned cold, and his eyes scanned the room. There were obvious signs of outsiders coming in everywhere. He called out calmly, "Housekeeper," snapped. Kneeling down on his knees, the butler's face was pale and bloodless, and he prostrated himself on the ground, trembling with fear, and said, "Patriarch, I dare to guarantee with my life that there has only been one accident in the family's former manor since you left, and there has been no change except for the family. Others have been here." "Accident? Tell me, what is the accident?" Kyle said softly. "About 10 years ago, the nearby forest suddenly caught fire. In order to prevent the fire from spreading to the manor, all the family members who stayed here went to fight the fire. For half a day, the manor was left unattended," the housekeeper recalled carefully, and quickly said, "After we seized it, we checked the main building, and there was no trace of property theft. As for the old warehouse, we did not have permission to enter, so we did not go in to check." Kyle frowned, remained silent for a moment, and said to Steve, "It should be the time. Someone entered here and forcibly took away Bucky, who was still sleeping in the ice. Those bastards, what are they going to do to Bucky?" Steve's handsome face was full of resentment, his fists were clenched tightly, and his bones made rattling noises. "It's been so long, it's not so easy to check." Kyle's face was expressionless, and a cold light flashed in his eyes, and he said calmly, "Don't worry about this matter. Someone is doing trouble in my territory, and I will give you a satisfactory answer." The butler's heart trembled, and his head sank even lower, knowing that the patriarch was really angry this time. The head of the family is angry, and the consequences are serious. "Kyle, I thank you in advance. However, Bucky's matter is my matter. I will do my best, no matter how hard I try, to find and bring him back." As Steve said, he walked resolutely to the basement door, as if he finally had his primary life goal after waking up from the ice. Kyle didn't stop him and let him leave first. "I wanted to take advantage of the rare peaceful time to let you take a good rest. Once you leave now, you won't be able to relax again in the future." Kyle sighed secretly, and his eyes fell on the broken and abandoned freezer again. He called softly again, "Housekeeper." "Yes," the butler raised his head and responded. Kyle said in a cold tone, "Notify all Carters, use all channel resources at hand, and find me the whereabouts of Bucky Barnes." "Yes, the task must be completed." The housekeeper nodded and quickly retreated to the basement. Until leaving the old warehouse, the housekeeper breathed a sigh of relief, wiped off the cold sweat from his forehead. His previously gentle and humble face was full of tyrannical murderous intent. "Which guys are causing trouble, almost killing me, on the earth?" Katu's personal strength is strong, and the forces he controls are all over the world. They ignore the powerful and the law, and have been the king of the underground world proudly for decades. And all of this was bestowed by Patriarch Kyle. They are truly under one man. The housekeeper smiled coldly. The Patriarch has just returned, and many Card disciples are waiting for the opportunity to show off. This time the news is released, and it is estimated that many murderous perverts are about to take action. Katu usually accepts zero organization tasks worth hundreds of millions of dollars, all of which are used to pass the time. No one knows how far they will go when they really get serious. On that day, Kyle spent the night at the manor before returning to New York City the next morning. Imperial Building. Since the establishment of the Unnatural Office, people from all walks of life around the world come every day, wanting to handle business or consult about supernatural events. There were also many jokes. For example, some people said that they were troubled by superpowers, but they turned out to be liars or mentally ill, and they were kicked out by the bottom Carters not long after. There are also many spies or media personnel from various countries who want to take the opportunity to find out some unknown secrets, but they are kicked out of the door even as chairs. After all, Katu is an old fritter who has been in the underground world. He is a top professional spy elite, arms dealer, and killer. It is really not an ordinary difficulty to deceive them. However, even though batch after batch were expelled, and the blacklist was growing day by day. There was still an endless stream of people coming to the office every day, and it seemed to have become a hot spot in New York. Kyle doesn't care about that. The reason why he started the unnatural firm was mainly to establish a family branch on the surface to let people know and recognize the existence of Katu. At the same time, it also treats people all over the world as spies, and uses this platform to collect some beneficial information. Of course, being able to track the existence of mutants like Logan, by the way, is considered an additional benefit. Kyle avoided the consulting crowd, walked through the staff passage, and went straight to the top floor from the private elevator. While still in the ascending elevator, Weesee's radio wave was connected to the building's internal network, and it didn't take long before the elevator's loudspeaker made a voice, "Master, your secretary, Yu Tong, is now in the top office." Kyle nodded, indicating that he understood. Weesee continued, "The expression is a bit melancholy, as if he has something on his mind." Kyle glanced at the electronic watch on his wrist, and said in surprise, "You can judge her expression and thoughts now. I learned this from Jarvis." Weiss silently pushed the blame to Jarvis. Kyle scolded angrily, "Jarvis is not as boring as you. It assists Tony and is still transforming the steel suit day and night. When are you going to learn from Tony? My current combat mode is yours. Steel form is the weakest." Weiss had nothing to say. "But yes, now in terms of comprehensiveness, the form of full coverage of Venom is changeable, and in terms of power, Vulcan's divine power is fully unstoppable. Taking the steel form of the technological branch, if it is not modified, it will really be outdated." Chapter 262. There are beautiful women in the West, Polaris. Kyle didn't pay attention to what Weesee said. Yu Tong, due to his ability to control his thoughts, is withdrawn and independent, and has been beheading Rising soldiers for him since he was a few years old. She will be depressed. Have something on your mind? Kyle smiled lightly and walked out of the elevator, but when he entered the hall, he suddenly stopped. I saw Yu Tong sitting quietly on the edge of the balcony's supporting wall, and the skirt of the long skirt fell down gently to the floor along her straight white legs. She turned her beautiful face slightly, her beautiful eyes looked out, her long black hair was blown by the breeze, and the sun fell on her body naturally. Like a youth independent of the world. The reason why Kyle was stunned was because Yu Tong in front of him felt melancholy and loneliness in addition to being glamorous and noble. Weesee was right. Yu Tong had something on her mind. In other words, Kyle never really understood Yu Tong. More than 60 years ago, he used her as a weapon and made her the most ruthless guardian of the family, guarding the Carl family's foundation for more than half a century. Now, he treats her as his secretary and entourage, and asks her to act according to the orders, killing people and saving people. It seems that she is noble and powerful, but she is low in the dust and doing the work of a maid. What Yu Tong was thinking about, what she wanted, Kyle didn't even think about it. "Rain pupil," Kyle shouted. When Yu Tong heard the voice, she immediately turned her head and smiled slightly. The previously indifferent and melancholy face showed a stunning and beautiful smile again. She fell off the buttress and said softly, "Boss, I already know what happened last night, and now enough." Kyle interrupted her, and asked inexplicably, "Let the other Carters do those things. Tell me, what were you thinking just now?" Yu Tong was stunned for a moment, a trace of panic flashed in her eyes, she lowered her head and remained silent. Kyle said bluntly, "What do you want to do? What concerns do you have? What ideas do you have? You can tell me. As long as I can do it, I will try my best to satisfy you." His temperament has always been like this. It's too difficult to guess a woman's mind, so he didn't try to guess at all, and asked questions directly. With Kyle's current strength and status, he can basically achieve the ideals that people often say, and he can basically ignore the concerns that people often say. But Yu Tong, who has always been obedient, this time it was not just why. She was silent for a long time. Kyle thought for a while, and said with a slight sigh, "If you want to regain your freedom and leave the Carl family, I can also promise you, Yu Tong has paid enough for the Carl family. If she really wants to be free, that is a concession that can be made." But as soon as his words fell, Yu Tong's delicate body trembled, and she raised her head in fear. Under the unprecedented panic, her pretty face turned pale. "Boss, are you going to drive me away?" Wow, the floor-to-ceiling windows of the window were shattered, and the table and wall decorations fell. Under the violent fluctuation of Yu Tong's emotions, the powerful thoughts were almost out of control, and they wantonly impacted and bombarded everything in the hall. "I'm just saying," before Kyle could repeat his words, As a black shadow passed by, the fragrant wind smelt his nostrils. And Yutong immediately jumped into his arms, holding his back tightly with both hands. "Boss, please don't drive me away," Yutong was really frightened and said tremblingly. At this moment, in a trance, Kyle seemed to see the little girl who had just come out of the glass nutrition tank again. "From now on, you will be the sharp knife in my hand." That one-word promise runs through ancient and modern times. Kyle realized that he had said the wrong thing, so he comforted Yutong in his arms, and said helplessly, "I didn't say I would drive you away, but I also want you to stay by my side. I just want to know, what do you think? Do something, really?" Yutong opened her eyes wide, and there were tears in her silver pupils. Of course, Kyle nodded. Yutong breathed a sigh of relief, thought for a while, hesitated to speak, and finally said anxiously, "I want to take you to meet someone." Seeing people, Kyle was stunned for a moment. Yutong had no relatives, which he knew, so he quickly guessed the correct answer, "Friend." Yutong nodded quickly. Kyle was really surprised this time. Yutong has the ability to read minds. Except for him, she has always disliked contact with people. She didn't expect to make friends now. "It can't be a man, can it? Go, take me to meet him," Kyle said with a straight face. He had to admit that he cared a little bit. After all, Yutong was brought back and raised by him, which was equivalent to his own daughter. Now that Yutong had said it, she no longer hesitated, and immediately nodded obediently in agreement. Black Rose Bar, Queens, New York. Accompanied by Yutong, Kyle frowned slightly when he came to the door of the bar. Because of his acquaintance with the playboy Howard, his first impression of the bar is slightly worse. Appointment to meet. The location is chosen at the bar. It seems that Yutong's friend is not a good guy, Kyle thought to himself with a straight face, a little bit of the urge to set the bar on fire. "Boss, it's in here." Yutong naturally leaned over, wrapped his hands around Kyle's arm, and led him to the hotel gate. Kyle held back the surging divine power in his body, followed Weesey and Venom lurking on his body, and the two quietly sweated for Yutong's friend. The bar is huge, with colorful lights flickering, trendy electronic music is exciting, and a group of young beauties are drinking and dancing to their heart's content. But after Kyle and Yutong walked in, the hall seemed to be quiet for an instant, and everyone tactfully got out of the way. On the bar counter of the bar, there was only a punk girl in a leather jacket with her back to the door, sitting lazily on a high chair drinking. She has a conspicuous dark green long hair shawl, a slender and graceful body curve, and coldly asked the bartender to add wine to the glass. Lorna, Yutong brought Kyle, came to the front like this, and called softly female. Kyle felt inexplicably relaxed. At this moment, the girl just turned around slowly. His eyes lit up. Obviously, the beauty in front of him is definitely not inferior to Natasha's Western beauty, but her style is a bit weird. The girl's delicate facial features are painted with smoky makeup, her lips are painted with dark red lipstick, and her dark green long hair is slightly curled down, making her look a little tired and rebellious. If Yutong represents an Oriental beauty, then this one is an out-and-out Western beauty. Especially when the two stand together. The Eastern and Western regions, ages, and personalities, appearances and styles are very different, and there is no sense of disobedience, but it makes people feel amazing. "You came?" The girl named Lorna was overjoyed, and she was about to ask Yutong to sit down, but when she saw Kyle, Yutong was holding Kyle in her hands, her beautiful face was instantly as cold as the North Pole, mixed with a hint of disgust. Although she recognized Kyle's identity at first sight, Lorna said coldly and draggingly, "Who are you?" Chapter 263 The Coveted Ability Card. As soon as Lorna's cold and domineering words came out, the faces of the young beauties in the bar changed drastically. Looking at the whole New York City, it is estimated that there is no one who does not know the silver-haired youth who accompanied Yutong. The bartender trembled and almost dropped the wine bottle in his hand. He leaned close to Lorna's ear and whispered in panic, "I'm talking about Big Sister, please be polite, the other party is peaceful anyway." "I was talking to him, is it your turn to talk too much?" Lorna gave him a cold look. The bartender retreated helplessly, and wisely put a certain distance between them, so as not to fight later and run away. "Don't worry, I don't care about little girls," Kyle smiled lightly. Although the dark green-haired beauty in front of him looked to be in her early 20s, in his eyes, she was still just a little girl who was not fully developed yet childish. But his casual words seemed to provoke Lorna, who was in a state of dark anger. I saw that her left hand was pressed, and a gorgeous green luster glowed from the palm of her hand. Those who can, or mutants. Seeing this scene, Kyle was surprised, and soon felt that the green light was transforming the force field. The air around his body suddenly stagnated, and the gravity field of the area where he was standing increased by 3 or 4 times in vain. "Lorna," Yutong exclaimed, and was about to say something, but Kyle directly raised his hand to stop her, and waved his hand to show that he was fine. In the gravitational field, Kyle raised his eyebrows lightly, and said indifferently and contemptuously, "That's all." On Lorna's beautiful face, the coldness intensified. From one hand to 2 hands, the green light rippled slightly in the air. The gravitational position only aimed at Kyle jumped from 4 times to more than 10 times in an instant. If it is an ordinary person facing this situation, I am afraid that he will kneel on the ground on the spot, and there will be many side effects such as nausea and dizziness. But Kyle's face remained the same as before, without the slightest discomfort, calmly watching Lorna, who displayed her ability, and took half a step forward lightly. It's a joke if something happens. After all, decades ago, he often performed warm-up exercises in the family base's gravity room, which was more than 10 times stronger. With 10 times the gravity of the Earth, Kyle felt really relaxed, not much different from usual. This greatly touched Lorna's self-esteem, prompting her to continue to display her abilities. Her hands began to tremble slightly, and the green light displayed by her abilities was even more splendid. 10 times, 13 times, 15 times, 18 times. Up to 20 times the gravity. Even the lights in the room bend slightly in the force field. Kyle easily walked up to Lorna, picked up the bottle, poured it into the glass, and swung the glass to take a sip of the wine. "It's not bad, but it's a bit too strong," he commented, and he didn't know whether he was tasting wine or using it to describe the other party. Lorna's face was slightly pale, her hands were pressed to the bottom, the green light was dancing like smoke, and the ability she was still not good at had been exerted to the extreme in the field of force field. But no matter how high the gravitational force field is, the man in front of him still has no abnormalities. This is a humanoid monster. While Lorna was in a trance, the green light in her hand suddenly turned, leading to the activation of other abilities. Clang clang clang. In just a split second, everything in the bar, especially the metal objects, trembled under the pull of some mysterious force, and they were about to launch an offensive towards Kyle, who is the hostile target. "Stop me," Yutong's angry voice sounded. At the very moment, an invisible and powerful thought force swept away like a wave, suppressing the trembling objects and making it difficult to move. Boom! The two superpowers clashed and collided indoors. The nearby glass and wine bottle couldn't bear the pressure, and immediately shattered with cracks. The scene was quite weird and spectacular for a while. Lorna raised her head in shock and saw the silver light in Yutong's eyes. She knew she had done something wrong, and immediately cancelled the ability she used. She apologized very sincerely and said, "I was wrong. Lorna just wanted to teach Kyle a lesson, but she didn't expect to use her unskilled ability unintentionally," which caused her best friend Yutong to get angry with her for the first time. A glint of approval flashed in Kyle's eyes. "If you don't like it, just put it on your face. This style is biased towards male domineering and straightforward. If you know you have done something wrong, you will simply admit and apologize." This girl's character suits him very well. Of course, the key point is the opponent's ability. Kyle's eyes fell on Lorna, and dozens of ability cards rushed out from her, 2 of which were dazzling. The first card is the ability used initially, the force field ability, force field traction. Create a force field for traction blue ability card. Create a local force field with abilities, which can reverse, weaken, or increase the force field in the area. Ability users can only create a force field within 50 meters, and the strength of the force field is directly related to the size of the area pulled by the force field and the factors of distance. The limit of force field traction is 20 times the Earth's gravity. Current status, extractable. In Kyle's view, this ability is very functional, but because it is a weakened version of the control force field, there are too many limiting factors, so the card brand appears so low. But Kyle's eyes didn't stop, but fell directly on the second ability card. In just a few seconds, he almost couldn't maintain his composure and exclaimed, "I never expected that I would encounter this ability card in the current world." One of his coveted ability cards, Magnetic Field Control, perfect control of the magnetic field and every detail, rare purple ability card. Any form of magnetic field can be controlled. The maximum ability that can be manipulated at one time is unknown. It is currently known that it can manipulate metal objects over 1,000 tons. The ability to control the magnetic field can be extended to the atomic level, changing the chemical structure and transforming substances. Can manipulate a large number of individuals at the same time, and conform them into complex machines, and even achieve invisibility by bending the visible light around them. To a certain extent, it is possible to strengthen one's own body with magnetic force, thereby enhancing strength and endurance, even exceeding the limit of human beings, thereby shortening one's own reaction time to 1/15 of normal human beings. Current status: unable to extract restrictions. Due to psychological conditions, the capable person has not fully mastered the ability. The card owner already has a rare purple prefixed ability card. The corner of Kyle's mouth twitched slightly, and his heart was bleeding and felt heartache. This is magnetic field control. Even more flawless than magnetic field control, develop this ability to the extreme, even killing gods is no problem. If there were not too restrictive conditions, he wanted to give up the existing Protus Gene ability card and extract the magnetic field control ability card. This ability can no longer be described as strong, but terrifying. What are you staring at me for? Lorna put aside her pretty face, covered her slightly dimpled chest, and gave Kyle a cold look with her beautiful eyes. Kyle looked away. He really didn't look at his chest. Who made that ability card so attractive? Sure enough, Yutong was definitely not at ease staying by such a man's side. Lorna sighed secretly, trying her best to find a strategy to get her best friend out of Kyle's clutches. Lorna is not an original character. It comes from the X-Men spin-off series, Extraordinary Talent. Most people call her Miss Polaris. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 264 Aurora, Meeting by Fate. In the bar, due to the battle of superpowers just now, a large group of handsome men and women have silently left the venue. When the gods fight, they can't be provoked. On a square wine table, Kyle and Yutong sat side by side, while Lorna sat alone directly opposite, with her hands on the back of the chair domineeringly. The three of them were silent, and the weird aura they formed, even the surrounding atmosphere was a bit weird and deadlocked. This is the wine you want, the bartender tremblingly approached with a tray holding several bottles of wine and intact glasses. After he quickly put down the wine and glass, he quickly backed away, for fear of being involved in this inexplicable dispute. Lorna's beautiful face seemed to be frosted. With her arms folded, she stared at Kyle with a straight face. If ice could kill people, Kyle would have been blown to pieces. Kyle was very leisurely, pouring himself wine naturally, while drawing cards out of his mind. Yes, although magnetic control cannot be extracted, force field pull is also a blue ability card that can't be met. This ability has little effect on the Protus genes today, and it is a card drawing option that can coexist well with each other. But Kyle doesn't care. It doesn't mean that Bao Yutong doesn't care. Yutong's beautiful eyes flashed with silver light, and she said in a cold tone, "Lorna, if you treat my boss like this again, I will not be polite. Friends are friends, but if you can only choose one between friends and bosses," then her answer was determined as early as 60 years ago. "Don't even stare." Lorna sighed secretly, but didn't dare to say it out loud. She couldn't lose her temper with Yutong. Now she knows the importance of Kyle to Yutong. Yutong, who had never lost his temper with her in the past, actually got into arguments with her many times because of him. Thinking of this, Lorna became even more annoyed. She directly picked up a bottle of wine, blew it domineeringly, and took a few gulps. Also a cruel man. Kyle shook his head. While reading the card, he was thinking about another thing. Another mutant. After Yutong, Logan and Saber-Toothed Tiger, this is the fourth mutant he has encountered. Moreover, this ability to control the magnetic field, as well as the direct domineering temperament, no matter how you look at it, it seems to have inherited a certain villain in the X-Men universe. Does that guy really exist? Wrong. Kyle dismissed the idea and rearranged his thoughts. Just like the Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver in the future, their existence and appearance are not necessarily the offspring of that guy. There is also the possibility of a genetic artificial man. The Lorna in front of me is probably born in the same background as Yutong, so she became a close friend with a heart-to-heart. When Kyle thought about it, he looked at Lorna with a gentler look. Happy, Lorna put down the wine bottle, and wiped her lips with the other hand, without the elegant burden of a goddess image. The wine flowed down her fair and clean chin, slipped down from her neck, and sank into the white gully. Then let's talk about business. Lorna squinted at Kyle, looked at Yutong again, and said with a slight turn of her eyes, "Mr. Peace, I know you are the legendary hero who ended World War II. But that's not the point. There is no reason for a woman to wait for you for so long, a full half a century." Lorna lowered her voice, and said in a calm voice, "I'll just ask you, do you want to marry Yutong?" Puff. Kyle just took a sip of the wine, and immediately sprayed it all, and the water mist sprayed Lorna across the face. Lorna didn't say much, picked up the towel, wiped her face and put it down. Everything showed that what she asked was serious. Kyle's mind was still in confusion and he didn't know what to say. Lorna was overjoyed, and said in a deep voice, "Sure enough, you haven't even thought about it. You have to know that Yutong is not young. If you don't marry her but still want her to stay with you, it's not very contradictory." Kyle thought about it. Indeed, this is also true. Yutong is really old. If there is a suitable candidate, why not? Kyle stopped, and he suddenly realized that he was not willing to bear Yutong in his heart. It is not the emotion between men and women, but a deeper bond, and it can even be said to be selfish possessiveness. He said perfunctorily and indifferently, "If Yutong wants to leave by herself, or if there is someone she likes, I will agree with her to leave." Lorna was secretly happy. Everything was going according to her plan. "I won't leave the boss," Yutong suddenly said firmly. She added, besides the boss, I don't have anyone I like." "Who said you didn't?" Lorna refuted her, pointed to her nose, and said loudly, "Aren't I?" Puff. Kyle just took a sip of wine, and when he heard such thunderous words, he couldn't hold back and sprayed Lorna in the face again. "Girl, you're thinking like this is dangerous. Obviously, you and I don't have that. We can't be life partners, we can only be friends," Yutong explained naturally. She was born with cognitive abilities and can read other people's thoughts. She understands many things and just ignores them. Yutong continued, "And my life and abilities are bestowed by the boss, and everything I have belongs to him only. If you want me to leave one day, you can kill me and leave with my body." Lorna fell silent. She knew that what Yutong said was probably true. The cabbage was eaten by the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Lorna sighed slightly, knowing that she was powerless to persuade, picked up the wine bottle depressedly, and drank half of it again. This meeting has basically come to an end. Exactly half an hour passed. A reminder sounded that the card was successfully drawn in Kyle's mind, and a blue ability card entered the card space, and it was next to the self-healing factor of the same level. When he was about to leave on his own, Yutong suggested, "That's right. Boss, can you shake hands with Lorna?" "Huh?" Kyle raised his eyebrows slightly, thinking that maybe this was the purpose of Yutong's trip, so he stood up very simply and stretched out his right hand forward. Lorna bickered, under Yutong's expectant eyes, lazily stood up from the chair, and also stretched out her right hand to hold it. This is just for Yutong, which symbolizes the recognition of the other party's friendly gesture. But when the palms of the two people touch each other, what's going on here? Lorna was startled, feeling her magnetic field control ability, and couldn't help it to run on its own, attached to the palm of her right hand and Kyle himself. Not only her. Even Kyle was surprised. The Vulcan divine power hidden in his body seemed to respond to the enthusiasm of the opponent's ability, like a warm current guiding palm and Lorna's body. When the two abilities touch together, it's like some kind of chemical reaction occurs, and there is an obvious qualitative change. In just a split second, the gorgeous and beautiful multicolored aurora lingered around the hands that were holding each other, illuminating the bar hall strangely and colorfully. If you join the group, you can see the photos of Miss Polaris. I don't know where the group number is now. Please go back and read the introduction of the book. Chapter 265. Its spouse season again. Aurora is a luminous phenomenon. It usually occurs at the north and south poles of the Earth, due to the flow of charged particles of the solar wind into the Earth's magnetic field, showing brilliant and beautiful brilliance on the night sky. Kyle never imagined that his Vulcan divine power with Protus' profound meaning, coupled with the magnetic field control of Lorna's mutant ability, will achieve the natural luminous phenomenon of aurora after the two come into contact with each other at zero distance on the ground. This has to be said to be a kind of coincidence in the dark. Let's not talk about Vulcan's supernatural power. It needs to be a person of the Protus, and the supernatural power is innate with the fire department, such as Thor and God of War, will not work. The ability to control the magnetic field, the high-level ability controlled by the magnetic field, requires a special variant of the X gene. Even among mutants, there is no one in a million possess these two abilities separately, and contact them together on the ground. The probability of looking at the entire universe is still basically zero. But at this moment, in the Queens District of New York on Earth, in a certain unpopular bar named Black Rose, centering on the hand held by Kyle and Lorna, the two abilities operate on their own, and the joyful water and milk blend together, and the gorgeous and colorful aurora radiance shimmers and runs aground in the room. Staring blankly, Lorna suddenly woke up from the trance, and withdrew her right hand like an electric shock. The aurora scene disappeared in an instant, and the bar hall immediately returned to its original state. Kyle took a last look at Lorna, waved his hand lightly, motioned Yutong to follow, and then left on his own to the bar door. "Lorna, I'll see you later. I'll come alone next time," Yutong said, and followed Kyle's pace. It wasn't until the two of them left the bar that Lorna nodded in response, and looked at her right palm inexplicably, where there was still some warmth from the Vulcan power. What's wrong? I've never felt this way before," Lorna said to herself, covering her chest with her palm, her heart beating faster than expected, like the interaction of abilities and continuous side effects. "That guy, what did he do to me?" Her body was heating up, and she had the illusion of wanting to see the aurora again. "Come out of the Black Rose bar." Kyle thought for a while, then said with a light smile, "Your friend is not bad. You can make friends, and you can even try to get him to accompany an unnatural law firm." "I know," Yutong nodded, lowering her head, showing a beautiful smile happily. She brought the boss here because she wanted him to recognize the existence of the other party, otherwise she would never be able to treat Lorna friendly and sincerely. Now this situation is considered complete. Yutong looked at Kyle's tall and generous back, and thought for no reason, but as long as we can keep doing this and follow behind the boss, it doesn't seem to be a big deal even for thousands of years. She quickened her pace and got closer to Kyle, but always kept the last meter away. At the end of the trip, Kyle fully integrated into the life on Earth in the 21st century after returning to the Emgren building. The daily research mainly focuses on the actual combat of Vulcan's divine power and the application of the artifact Eternal Fire. Timely inspection of the improvement of Tony's steel suit, and attention to unnatural phenomena around the world. At the same time, Bruce Banner has moved to New York alone, and he has to accept the long-distance tracking of elite agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. every day. What's more, in the past 2 weeks, the whole world has been under currents 1. In order to use the power of the country to find the whereabouts of his friend Winter Soldier Bucky, the legendary hero Captain America Steve Rogers officially announced his comeback and joined the mysterious United Nations Department S.H.I.E.L.D. Black Widow and Hawkeye ran around the world, performing secret operations missions of S.H.I.E.L.D., and tracking down traces of the remnants of the Hydra organization. Second, the Carl family and the Carters of the Zero organization secretly dispatched, also looking for the whereabouts of the Winter Soldier, which accidentally caused turmoil in the underground world. Countless nobles and private organizations with ancient backgrounds are unknown. Therefore, we can only strictly prohibit the power personnel from going out without authorization, hiding at home shivering. In addition, there are things that no one knows about secretly happening. Africa, central remote areas. On the vast and endless tropical grassland, a large herd of cattle and sheep are leisurely drinking water by the slightly dry pool, and in the wild grass nearly half a person's height beside it, predators such as lions and leopards are waiting for the opportunity to move. A mighty male lion crawled close, and when it was about to sprint and hunt, its ears slapped abruptly. It raised its head vigilantly and looked towards the sky. The pupils of the beast that suddenly shrank reflected the fierce fire. In the clear blue sky, an interstellar spaceship was approaching extremely fast. When breaking through and passing through the atmosphere at high speed, the hull of the spaceship rubbed and ignited spontaneously, looking like a fireball falling towards the surface. The distance between the spaceship and the grasslands below rapidly shortened. 5,000 meters, 1,000 meters, meters. Countless cattle, sheep and predators panicked and ran away desperately. Boom! The interstellar spaceship slammed into the pool, and under the terrifying impact, the mud all over the sky was splashed tens of meters away. Most of the spaceship was embedded in the ground, turned off, sizzling, and the small hatch facing the sky suddenly opened. Amidst the billowing smoke, a tall and burly alien man climbed out of the cabin door, stood on top of the crashed spaceship, and looked around the surrounding savannah in a daze. "This is the Earth," the alien man muttered to himself. His eyes were as black as ink, showing different emotions, and his fists were clenched nervously. 26 years have passed since the space-time wormhole of Sokka left, wandering in the human world and the universe. On the way, he changed countless biological hosts, crossed a Milky Way, and finally came here after stumbled. The Earth, the place where the memory in the mind has always been remembered. I hope that here, I can find the things I have been looking for in my memory. The alien man took a deep breath, jumped off the interstellar spaceship, squatted beside him and looked at the bubbling mud in the only half of the pool left. He stretched out his hand like lightning, grabbed and pulled, and a black fish was already in his hand, flicking its tail and struggling desperately. The alien man licked his lips, his stomach was rumbling. He didn't care that the fish was still covered in mud, so he directly stuffed it into his mouth, and started to eat it raw. In the grass not far behind, the male lion approached quietly, staring at the prey in front of him vigilantly and coldly. It moved violently, like an arrow off the string, the strong wind blowing down the grass, and it swiftly and vigorously rushed towards the back of the man's neck and bit it. The alien man remained motionless, still tasting the earth-flavored raw fish, unaware of the imminent danger. The male lion opened its blood-plated mouth and jumped up. When it bit the back of the neck for nearly half a meter, a black spike protruded fiercely from the man's back and neck. "Wow!" The male lion screamed and whimpered, and the sharp and tough black spikes pierced through its soft mouth, piercing through its entire animal body, and the scarlet blood flowed down the spikes. The alien man wiped the mud from the corner of his mouth, tore off the lion's body from the spikes with one hand, grabbed the lion's body and bit the wound with his mouth, making his mouth full of hair and blood. "Bah, it's unpalatable," the alien man spat out, threw the lion on the ground in disgust, and stepped on it angrily. The poor overlord of the Earth's grassland accidentally encountered a top creature returning to the Earth toxin. Chapter 266 Make a Creature for Play. Deheo Building, in the lobby on the next floor from the top floor. The flame flickered, and the golden fire plate containing the eternal flame was placed on a low square table. Kyle sat cross-legged at the table, touching his chin with his hands, and the golden pupils reflected the fierce burning flames. A small metal robot sat on the other side of the table, imitating Kyle with his chin propped up, and also staring at the flame. Under the gaze of one person and one machine. Inside the eternal flame, a translucent green figure could be faintly seen, as if in the burning torment of the flames. From time to time it let out horrifying wails. Sure enough, Kyle nodded. During this period of time, with the assistance of Weesey, he continued to study the eternal fire and the experiment. Legend has it that a family of artifacts contains the mystery of destruction and rebirth. Kyle once used it to burn the villain Abomination, who was comparable to the Hulk, to death. Although it was just directly covered with a golden fire plate, it can be seen from this that it is partially destroyed. It only has the shape and temperature of an ordinary flame, but it ignores all defenses and all laws. In front of the eternal fire, all living beings are equal, regardless of whether you are a human or a god. You will be burned without error. Possessing such a powerful power that is comparable to the power of gemstones, Kyle naturally wants to control the eternal fire and use it as his main artifact for attacking. It's a pity that after a week of tossing, Vulcan's divine power was exhausted and recovered more than 10 times, but the divine power still could not control the eternal flame to leave the fire plate. Kyle has only recently figured it out. Eternal flame is not an artifact weapon like Thor's hammer and Ares axe. It is more appropriate to say that it is a supreme auxiliary item than a weapon. That is to say, another artifact is needed to be fused with the eternal fire in order to exert its real powerful power. Kyle immediately remembered the forging method of the eternal sword left by the previous generation of Vulcan, obtained in the Hall of Valor. It's a pity that the several materials of the eternal sword are all rare and the best in the universe. It is impossible to gather them together in a short time. Kyle had no choice but to temporarily give up building his own artifact. But this time was not in vain. Under the exposure to the eternal flame day and night, Kyle accidentally read the part of the mystery behind the destruction mystery, which is called rebirth. "Master, what did you think of?" Weiss asked in surprise. "The eternal flame is too mysterious, and with the current stage of scientific investigation, it is impossible to conduct a specific theoretical analysis." Kyle exhaled, his eyes flickered, shrugged and said, "I wondered before, why the eternal fire? Since there is such an extreme secret of destruction, there is also the opposite secret of rebirth. You understand now, Weiss asked in human surprise. Yes, but you still have to try to know. Kyle stood up, rubbed his palms, and stared at the green shadow in the flame of the golden plate. Like a curious baby, Weiss continued to ask, what are you going to try? Create creatures, Kyle said in a deep voice. Create creatures. Weiss machinery turned its eyes, flashed countless data torrents, and finally came to a serious conclusion. If it is you, then you need a human woman. MRS. Lucy is not here. I think the best candidate is Secretary Yutong. What have you learned from Tony? Kyle glanced at it and said coldly, the way I said to create creatures is to go against the rules of nature and create unprecedented race creatures. Weiss trembled all over, subconsciously replied, just like me. Kyle thought for a while, nodded and said, almost. Weiss is given life by the fire extracted from the sacrificial card. It is the life of a race of deformed machines, a unique existence in the entire universe. Now, he wants to use the eternal fire to create another brand new race creature. This method is not original. The future goddess of death once used the eternal fire to create an army of death under her command. Kyle believes that he can do it now. Weiss, where's the body of the god of war now? Kyle asked. Weiss replied, when the interstellar spacecraft was being repaired at the family base, it was transferred to the laboratory on the second floor of the basement. The Lord God seemed very interested in this, and he was doing biological research. The master god of the artificial intelligence housekeeper, who is in charge of all affairs on Dragon Turtle Island full-time, is 100 times more cold than the previous Jarvis. Kyle pondered for a moment, and ordered, now, go to Yutong upstairs, use the fixed portal to return to the base, and seal up the corpse of the god of war and bring it here. As for the research experiment, don't destroy the corpse, take some muscle tissue and keep it enough. Okay, Weiss responded, and the mechanical feet turned into wheels, and quickly drove upstairs. After it left, the hall where only Kyle was left was silent. Then let's start with you. Kyle sat down cross-legged again, facing the eternal flame with his hands and palms, and unleashed the surging Vulcan divine power. Hoo-hoo. The eternal flame rose slightly, and the fire was burning vigorously. This time, Kyle did not have the idea of controlling the eternal flame, but used divine power as fuel to feed it. The purpose of doing this, of course, is to roar. The inner green shadow moved wildly in the flames, making extremely painful wailing sounds. Seeing that it was effective, Kyle poured out Vulcan's supernatural power as if he didn't want money. He wants to use the eternal fire to burn and purify the soul of hatred, and brand his own life mark. Under the irrigation of Vulcan's divine power, the eternal fire continued to burn vigorously, and the hateful souls in the fire plate were burning, and their struggle and resistance continued to weaken, and the touch of green faded little by little. This burning lasts for half an hour. Until Kyle gasped for breath, sweating profusely, the divine power in his body was almost exhausted. The shadow in the eternal flame finally completely changed from green to translucent white, and a strong breath of life flowed from it. It's like removing the impurities of the soul through forging, and extracting that bit of essence that is the core of life. At the same time, the door opened and Yutong stepped in. There was a silver light in her eyes, and she raised one hand high, and an advanced cuboid storage instrument was suspended and followed beside her. Master, the item has been retrieved. Sitting on the instrument, Weiss announced. Hurry up, throw the body of the god of war into the eternal flame, Kyle said quickly. Yutong didn't hesitate, his eyes shone with silver light. And he opened the lid of the coffin-like instrument with his mind. Inside the instrument, a tall and burly man lay with his eyes closed, with iron chains wrapped around his wrists, obviously no longer alive, but the wounds on his body were glistening with blood, and the sense of divine power and coercion still remained, as if he had just died not too long ago. Yutong continued to use her thoughts, and the corpse immediately floated out and rushed towards the exuberant eternal fire. Fuck. As soon as the god of war's corpse touched the eternal flame, the flames gushed out and wrapped the corpse in place. Kyle opened his eyes wide, nervously watching what happened next. For the first time, the eternal flame did not devour and burn the corpse of the god of war, but while lingering and burning, the inner white spirit guided it to fall towards the finger-shaped wound between the eyebrows. It's done, Kyle said with emotion. A new creature is about to be born. Chapter 267 Analysis of the Mysteries of Rebirth. The top floor of the Deheo building is the next floor, in the center of the hall. The flames were raging, and the golden fire plate placed on the table seemed to be an oven. The inner eternal fire flowed out and rotated, wrapping and burning the corpse suspended in midair. It was obviously burning more and more vigorously, but not only did the tall corpse not turn into ashes, but its vitality became more and more vigorous. It's like he's coming alive. The evil spirit refined by the soul of hatred, combined with the physical body of Kratos, the god of war, is reborn through the eternal fire of the artifact. What kind of race creature will be created by the combination of these three? From a safe distance, Kyle held his breath, full of anticipation, quietly waiting for the moment when the creature was created. Standing next to him was Yutong, whose pupils were still shining with silver light, and powerful thoughts filled the hall vigilantly, ready to deal with potential dangers that might exist next. Wissy stood on the instrument where the corpse was originally stored, the antenna protruded from the metal head, and two beams of light were shot out from the mechanical eyes, falling on the corpse that produced a ray of life. Establish a database with the universe information owned by Earth and Sokka, and analyze it with a rebirth formula. Analysis failed. Analyze again. Analysis failed. A powerful torrent of data is performing calculations in its body. The huge and complex calculations make its mechanical body heat up rapidly, and it almost enters a dead state in just a few seconds. Analysis failed. Draw a preliminary conclusion. Relying on the main body to perform calculations alone, it will take at least 1 million hours to obtain the probability of analysis progress. Wissy was helpless, knocked on his forehead, and stretched out the second antenna unconvinced. Emergency contact antenna. At this time, Tony's villa, the private manufacturing room on the ground floor. Wearing a new and improved steel suit, Tony, who turned into an Iron Man, raised his hand and quickly aimed at the set target 10 meters away. The engine in the palm of his hand highlighted and fired a laser beam. Beep. The target burst into pieces in response, and the bursting white laser annihilated the fragments into ashes. Not bad, Tony nodded, and said in a deep voice, Jarvis, help me record the speed and power of the laser cannon converted from Krypton gold energy in the private database. Okay. Just after Jarvis finished speaking, he suddenly seemed to have received some message, and said abnormally, Sir, what's wrong? Tony asked in surprise. I'm going out for a while, and I'll be right back. Jarvis finished speaking. Before Tony could respond, the data panel provided by the steel suit disappeared immediately. Obviously, the artificial intelligence system had left the inside of the suit through cables or signals. Tony was stunned for a moment, took off the steel helmet, revealed a face full of puzzlement, and said to himself helplessly, Jarvis, what are you going to do with Weiss again? Only the Godfather Kyle has the authority to directly transfer Jarvis away from him, but the Godfather will let him know in advance even if he borrows it. Apart from the Godfather, there is only Wissy who is also an artificial intelligence beside the Godfather. Since Jarvis and Weiss have been mixed together, both have become more human. And I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing. Tony shook his head inexplicably. Only one person could register the data the other side. The island base far overseas, the headquarters of the Carl family. Emergency communication. Wissy requests to connect to the call. There was a beep in the central room of the system, and under the three-dimensional projection of several devices, the virtual white ball formed by the code fluctuated slightly. Connected. Within 0.1 second, Wissy's anxious voice sounded, Lord God, come to New York quickly. I have a problem and need your help. Refused. The main god responded coldly, according to the source code of the program, this system cannot leave the family base, otherwise it will be wiped out. Kill your head. Don't be prudish. Jarvis has come to me. I have a rare opportunity to analyze. When Wissy said this, he transmitted a photo by the way, which was the scene photo of the eternal fire creating life. The virtual white sphere fluctuated violently, without hesitation too much, and immediately carried out a system transfer through the satellite in the sky. This is the main god of artificial intelligence, leaving the family base for the first time. After 3 seconds. Even Kyle and Yutong didn't notice. The little robot opened its eyes again, and the mechanical eyes stared straight ahead. The eternal fire was close to creating a strange scene in the middle and late stages of life. At this moment, Wissy, Jarvis, and Lord God, the three artificial intelligences gathered in this little mechanical body. Based on the original database, connect the Stark Industrial Supercomputer and the Carl family supercomputer, and reanalyze the rebirth mystery. The huge torrent of data flows like a river of stars, carrying out a most complex calculation and analysis in the history of life. The eternal flame began to gradually weaken, and the inner corpse, no, it should be said to be a living thing, seemed to have a lingering and weak breath. "It's almost ready," Kyle said to himself, and he could clearly feel a sense of oppression, which naturally surged from the creature. Analysis failed. "There is not much time, brothers. Borrow all the supercomputers in the United States," Weiss yelled anxiously. Together, Weiss and Jarvis can control any network communication in New York at will, not to mention the combination of 3 artificial intelligences far beyond contemporary technology. In just a few seconds, the supercomputers in the United States collectively fell and expanded to the entire Americas. Numerous staff members in the scientific research room stared at the supercomputer screen in a dead state with dumbfounded expressions. Until borrowing the supercomputer of the whole hemisphere of the Earth, the huge data-sharing calculation, the core of the little robot, finally issued a wonderful sound of technology. The analysis is successful. 1% of the mystery of rebirth has been analyzed. Hoo-hoo. At the same time, the eternal flame returned to its original state, declaring that the analysis of the rebirth equation was temporarily over. But in any case, even if it is only 1%, it is the most difficult beginning. It's like finding the starting point of the path leading to the truth of the universe among countless paths. Clap. The creature suddenly jumped out of the eternal flame, the iron chain clanged crisply, and it squatted slightly and landed on the smooth floor of the hall. "This is..." Kyle opened his eyes wide, gasped slightly, and looked at the tall creature in front of him in shock. Nearly 3 meters tall, with muscles as strong as a rock, the faint green flames continued to burn the whole body, and long flaming chains were wrapped around his hands and arms. It can no longer be regarded as a human being, or a Proteus, full of evil and destructive horror, like a fire monster returning from hell. When Kyle looked at it, it looked at Kyle. Its empty eyes had no eyeballs, and it tilted its head in doubt. Its flaming mouth merged up and down, as if greeting affectionately, but no sound came out. Kyle could feel that there was a real sense of connection between master and servant with it. This should be the reason for the breath of life imprinted on one's own body when refining the essence. "Since it is the life I created," Kyle raised his eyes, looked at the raging flames on the creature, and said, "You will be called Hellfire from now on." Chapter 268 Ghost Rider? Since Kyle thought that the goddess of death could also use the eternal fire to create subordinates, he was not very surprised at the birth of the current Hellfire. What he doesn't know is that the rebirth bestowed by the eternal fire, the more powerful the creature, the more difficult it is to create success. The goddess of death used the materials to create the undead army. The spirits were the loyal dead soldiers followed by the previous army, and the corpses came from the Asgardian soldiers who died in anger. The creatures created by mass production would naturally not be too powerful. And the materials of the creatures created by Kyle are hatred and god of war. Before they were alive, even looking at the entire universe, they were top creatures who could dominate a starry sky. This is also because the combat power of the two pure physiques is not far apart, and both are biological powerhouses who tend to strengthen their physiques. When paired together, the repulsion is basically zero, so that the unique fire system of Hellfire has been cleverly achieved. Evil spirits. In the hall, the Hellfire could not speak. The tall and burly monster stood like a gate god of hell, only the dark green flames were burning around the body. Yutong looked at the Hellfire, his eyes were silvery. The next moment, her delicate body trembled slightly, and she said with a slightly pale face, "I can't read its inner voice. Once my thoughts get close, it's like being burned by that flame, immune to mental attacks." Kyle touched his chin, thought for a moment, and suddenly said as if commanding, "Raise your hand." Hellfire immediately followed suit, raised his hands in a funny way, and looked at him blankly with flaming eyes. "Use one hand, attack me once," Kyle continued. He wanted to simply test the strength of Hellfire. Hellfire didn't think too much. He raised his left hand and clenched his fist, took a step forward and swung it suddenly. The chain around his wrist clanged under the powerful punch. Its movements were a little slow and heavy, but the flames on the left fist were fierce, and a destructive pressure swept away. Although he had been prepared, Kyle's face changed slightly. He did not use the venom, and fought with his bare hands. Two fists of different sizes collided with each other. Boom! Not only the astonishing impact of force, but also the confrontation between the green flame and the golden divine fire, which instantly caused the high-temperature air wave in the room to burst open. The entire Emgren building trembled like an earthquake. Centered on Kyle and Hellfire, the strong high-temperature airflow around them shattered the floor-to-ceiling windows on both sides of the hall into slag. Yutong was forced to open his hands, and his thoughts formed a repulsive protective shield to isolate the flames and air waves, and incidentally protected the wheezy mechanical body beside him. "Stop!" Kyle yelled. Hellfire immediately withdrew his fist, and took a step back, re-entering the state of stupor like a statue. It was as if the punch full of rage and destructive power just now was not what it cast. Kyle breathed a sigh of relief, lightly waved his left hand, and the divine flame on the bodyguard on his palm was extinguished and dissipated. So strong, absolutely no less than the Hulk and the Abomination, and the attack methods are even richer than them. The punch just now had only about, tons of strength. But it was blessed by the burning of high-temperature flames, and it was also accompanied by passive spiritual damage. It should be said that it is worthy of being the creation of the eternal flame. The flames on Hellfire's body can ignore part of the defense and indirectly burn and attack the soul and spirit of the opponent. It's a pity that my self-awareness is not high enough. I only have the intelligence of a 6-year-old child. Fortunately, I completely obey my orders. It is more than enough to be used as a meat shield, bodyguard and guardian. It is just that I can't fly, and my movements are a bit slow. Thinking of this, Kyle suddenly waved his left hand and pulled out a card that he hadn't dealt with for a long time. Rare blue creature card, Black Flame Horse. Kyle immediately summoned. In the next moment, a tall and mighty black horse, wearing dark armor and stepping on black flames, appeared in the center of the hall with a long howl. Seeing this scene, Yutong and the 3 artificial intelligences in the robot were frightened, wondering what the patriarch was thinking about. The Black Flame Horse and Hellfire stood side by side, and the combination of strange beasts and evil spirits didn't feel any sense of disobedience. Kyle's eyes lit up slightly. He had previously felt that flamboyant and conspicuous mounts like the Black Flame Horse were useless for him. Now it seems that Hellfire can be matched with a Black Flame Horse to make up for each other's strengths and weaknesses, and become the strongest guardian spirit of the Carl family for a long time. Hellfire with a horse riding, isn't this a ghost rider? Kyle thought to himself that he seemed to have created an incredible existence by accident. He even wanted Hellfire to try riding the Black Flame Horse right now, but after looking around the devastated hall, he could only resolutely dismiss this extravagant idea. Try again, the family is gone. Kyle's interest remained undiminished, and he was about to try changing places. Weiss suddenly received a contact message and sent out a prompt voice. "Master, Nick Fury is sending you a communication request, Fry." Kyle was surprised. After thinking for a while, he nodded in agreement and said, "There's nothing urgent, he won't be calling, let's get through." 10 minutes later. Brooklyn, Halen Street, SHIELD Headquarters Building. The private helicopter landed in front of the door. The hatch hadn't been opened yet. He was already waiting to be picked up at the door of the building. Fury, who was dressed in a black windbreaker and had a one-eyed bald head, rushed up to meet him. The hatch opened, and Kyle, wearing sunglasses, got off the plane alone. Yutong didn't travel with him this time because he wanted to arrange a place for Hellfire. Kyle looked at Fury, who came forward, raised his eyebrows slightly dissatisfied and said, "Fury, what happened? You can't tell me on the phone. Do you have to call me to the SHIELD headquarters?" "Naturally, it is a future plan related to important decisions of SHIELD, and requires professional advice and guidance from you, the General Counsel," Fury said with a gentle smile on his ferocious face. "Plan?" Kyle glanced at him, then changed the topic and said, "By the way, where did Steve ask you to arrange?" When Fury heard this, his face was a little ugly, and he hesitated to say, "It's overseas. A ship of SHIELD has been hijacked by pirates. And the captain and Natasha are in the rescue." The ship of SHIELD was hijacked by pirates? "Tell Steve to go there." Kyle was speechless for a while, almost suspecting that he heard it wrong. This is like a junior high school student who was bullied by an elementary school student, and now the college student is notified to find his way back. "Don't worry, they can solve this trouble smoothly." Fury exhaled, patted Kyle on the shoulder, and led him into the SHIELD headquarters building. What will happen later is the most important thing. Both of them have the highest authority of SHIELD, ignoring the cumbersome password checkpoints all the way, passing through the lobby on the first floor, and taking the elevator to the bottom of the ground floor. This waiting was a long half a minute, as if descending from a height of more than 10 floors. When the bottom floor is reached, the elevator opens. Fury stepped out first, and said in a deep voice, "Kyle, I need you to tell me, is what we built here right or wrong?" Kyle frowned, and then walked out of the elevator. Seeing the magnificent things in front of him, causing the golden pupils to shrink slightly in surprise. Chapter 269. There is an inner ghost. Terminate the plan. SHIELD headquarters, an underground space, meters deep from the surface. The things hidden here are like the corner of the ice floes on the sea. With a height of, meters and a width of about, meters, the underground space here is more than 10 times wider than any football stadium in the world. Under the countless large lights on the ceiling and walls, steel weapon creations condensed with the crystallization of technology in the 21st century, crawling like fortresses in the underground factory, full of hideous and terrifying gun holes, vortex engines, etc. The shell contrasted with the faint coldness of the metal. Kyle's pupils shrank, and there were actually 3 giant aircraft carriers parked under the SHIELD headquarters building. Among them, thousands of modern fighter planes are in preparation, and countless staff members are densely packed in this underground space, like ants, busy and hard-working in the final stage of perfecting the project. This scene revived Kyle's distant memory a little, and felt that he had missed a slightly important future plot event. Fury's face sank, and he explained, "These are not ordinary national aircraft carriers, but 3 generations ahead of the helicopter carrier, which is directly connected to the positioning satellite. Once it flies into the sky, it does not need to land spherical satellites, orbiting the Earth in suborbital motion." Not bad. Hearing this, Kyle nodded and commented, "He is on Sokka, and he hasn't directly seen the light of science and technology in the universe, and he is even used to the interstellar spaceships that travel through galaxies. A good is already a very high evaluation language. It should be Tony's credit here," Kyle said with a smile. "Such a large-scale advanced scientific and technological project, without Stark's intervention, would be impossible to succeed with the current technological level of the Earth. Of course, that advanced country that is still hiding from the world and has mines at home is another story." Fury nodded and said, he looked at the old engine, and the design was improved into a helicopter engine, so that the aircraft carrier could achieve the feat of flying into the sky. 3 helicopters, equipped with long-distance precise positioning weapons, can kill 1,000 enemies in 1 minute. Frey paused. Hesitation appeared on his dark face. He gritted his teeth and continued, "There is no need for monitoring and scanning to lock in. Satellites can directly read the DNA of criminals, and they can be killed before terrorists commit crimes. This is SHIELD's secret inside plan since the 21st century." After Fury finished speaking, he looked sideways at Kyle, wanting to listen to his comments and suggestions. Unexpectedly, Kyle shook his head lightly, without giving any face, and said indifferently, "Fury, you are so stupid." Furui heard the words, one eye widened, did not refute, just lowered his head to listen to the following. "In this world, as long as there is light shining, there must be shadows. It is impossible to completely eliminate evil." Kyle looked at the helicopter and said in a deep voice, "I know, you agree with this plan because you think it can kill many objects that pose a threat to the world in the cradle, but have you ever thought that if the world is getting closer to if you don't talk about the regularization of human relationships, then why bother talking about civilization and morality? A person's actions in his life, good and evil, are only a difference of one thought. If DNA, lifestyle, etc. are used for comprehensive analysis, and the bad guys who are judged to be future villains in childhood are shot and killed on the spot, that would be too absurd and ridiculous." Kyle finally concluded, "If these 3 helicopter carriers go to the sky, human beings all over the world will no longer have freedom at all from that moment. Under the depression and panic of life being threatened at all times, humans' criminal intentions will only be destroyed. It will continue to increase until the aircraft carrier kills all human beings in the world." Fury trembled all over, fell silent for a long time, and sighed heavily. "Yesterday, I brought Steve here, and he also didn't approve of this plan. Now after what you said, I also feel that I took it for granted. It's not too late as long as you pause now." Kyle raised his eyebrows slightly, looked at Fury seriously, and suddenly asked, "Fury, did you come up with this plan alone?" Fury shook his head and replied, "No. It was just an idea before, and many high-level personnel of SHIELD have perfected it." "Is there anything wrong?" "Of course not. Something very wrong." Kyle thought for a while, a cold light flashed in his eyes, and continued to ask, "Now, you are no longer the director of SHIELD, can you still suspend the inside plan?" "Yes." Fury nodded, and said confidently, "I have the highest level of authority of SHIELD. Even the current director of SHIELD is not as high as I am. As long as Natasha, the current deputy director, comes back, I and her authority can directly delay the plan." Kyle looked at Fury and said, Fortunately, you are not extremely confused. Fury, do you still remember what I told you at the manor when S.H.I.E.L.D. was founded more than 60 years ago? Fury bowed his head, clenched his fists and said, "Of course I remember. I issued a military order to you. As long as I am here for a day, I will not let corruption and crimes happen to your S.H.I.E.L.D., sir. Otherwise, it's good that you know." Kyle patted Fury on the shoulder and said coldly, "It's best for you to solve the matter of S.H.I.E.L.D. Don't wait until I can't help but make a move. If I make a move, S.H.I.E.L.D. will bleed like a river." After Kyle finished speaking, he immediately turned and walked to the elevator, leaving Fury with a heavy face on the spot. By the way, regarding the 3 helicopter carriers, I'm afraid they will be really useful one day in the future, but the target is not the Earth creatures. Kyle waved his hand, walked into the elevator, and chose to go up to leave the underground space. This goes back to the question Tony asked in the first place. A terrifyingly powerful technological weapon is not bad, it just depends on who uses it and whether the holder has enough ability to control it and use it reasonably on the right path. Assuming that the 3 helicopter carriers have the authority to use only Kyle, then change the original Inside plan to a duty similar to that of the Ancient One Mage, and use it as the Earth's counterattack weapon against foreign invasion, the nature of the matter is another matter. Earth, it's still too weak. Kyle shook his head slightly, feeling the pressure of racing against time. When the human beings on the Earth were still fighting each other in a civil war, there were only a few people who focused on the powerful threat from outside the Earth. One of them, named Gu Yi, is a supreme mage so far. It has secretly guarded the Earth for hundreds of years. Now there is another one, named Kyle, who is a card-drawing person. He has no idea of selfless contribution to the human beings on the Earth, but selfishly wants to protect and possess the things he likes. In the underground space. After thinking for a long time, Fury entered the elevator and headed towards the chief's office on the top floor with his one-eyed flashing light becoming more and more determined. Kyle might be right. There may be a problem within the Inside Project and S.H.I.E.L.D. The plan must be terminated immediately. Chapter 270. Kyle didn't take the helicopter, and on a whim, used his authority to embezzle the car that the S.H.I.E.L.D. executives traveled secretly. On the surface, it looks like a black commercial vehicle of Volkswagen, but it actually has functions such as bulletproof shell, emergency shooting, satellite positioning and automatic driving. Weiss kicked off the built-in AI of the car aggressively, and drove on the main road as an invisible driver. He didn't return to the Emgren building in the first place. The commercial vehicle wandered around the streets of New York, deliberately passing some quiet and secluded churches. Kyle sat in the co-pilot, opened the car window, looked through the sunglasses, and swept across these church buildings from time to time, carefully using his divine power to investigate. He's looking for a mage, to be more precise. It is a mage with a magic weapon for hanging rings on his body. After all, divine power is not magic power. Without the key of the ring, one cannot open a door of the human body, let alone use various spells with cosmic mysteries. Kyle wants to get a hanging ring, the use of recovery spell skills, this is one of them. Second, now that he has achieved the divine body, and has mastered the strongest underground forces on the Earth, he has preliminarily possessed the same high status as the Ancient One Mage, so he wants to discuss life and future with him. The truth is, if you want to draw a card, draw the skill card of the Supreme Mage. However, although we know that there are mages, most mages are led by Guya and practiced in retreat in the alien space of the Earth's Kamataj slit, so it is really not that simple to find a mage who walks in this world thing. Looking back now, Kyle really felt that the Master Blue who was sent to the door was so rare and cute, and he should have left a few more canned meat for the other party. Okay, Kyle frowned slightly, and suddenly looked out the car window. The commercial vehicle was about to pass by the iconic building of the Seventh Church. This church is located in the bustling downtown of New York, just beside the noisy street. The building is only 3 floors, and it has a Western classical atmosphere. The most important thing is that the divine power fluctuated just now, as if it was isolated by something in the church. Weiss, stop, Kyle broke his mouth. After the commercial vehicle stopped on the side of the road, he opened the door and walked out. The small church building is leaning against the roadside, the gate is closed, and the surface of the building is holy and spotless. Kyle didn't think too much, pushed open the exquisite iron door, and what came into view was an empty and quiet hall, with classical decorations on the walls and aisles. Looking inside, there is a spacious staircase leading to the second floor. In just a split second, he knew he was in the right place. "Is anyone there?" Kyle asked as he stepped into the hall. No one responded, only the voice of questioning echoed slightly in the hall. Kyle smiled lightly and was about to walk up the stairs, but suddenly a small voice came from behind him. He looked back and found that at the main entrance of the church, there was a white envelope dropped on the ground, but there was no one around. Kyle walked back, picked up the envelope, opened it and looked at it, with a meaningful expression on his face. He took the initiative to walk out of the door and close the iron door smoothly. After a little while, the commercial vehicle restarted, merged into the main road, and returned in the direction of the Emgren building. At this time, the church building, the lobby on the second floor. A bald woman in a yellow robe stood by the window, through the patterned glass of the window, silently watched the commercial vehicle drive away from the door. Accompanied by him, a black young mage asked in surprise, "Master Guyi, that one just now is a symbol of peace. Anyone else but him?" Guyi said calmly. "He still came back, which means I can't control him now." The young mage was puzzled and asked, "You strictly forbid the mage to contact him in private, but why didn't you move the space in advance and let him enter our New York branch, Modu?" "How do you know that I don't have room to move?" Guyi sighed softly. "Could it be that how is this possible?" Modu opened his eyes wide in surprise. "Once the space is transferred, the true interior of the church will be hidden in the alien space next door to the real world. Others entering from the outside will not be able to reach the real New York branch church." But just now, Kyle didn't use spells, but ignored the space compartment and walked into the real New York branch. Guyi was also surprised by this, and said softly, "There seems to be a rhythm of space hidden in his body, and the spell of space transfer has failed for the first time." "Unpredictable," Modu said seriously. "His behavior is weird, but from the current point of view, the Earth is indeed developing in a positive direction under his guidance." Guyi pondered for a moment, then ordered, "Observe for a while longer. In addition, the New York branch has been exposed. Let the mages be careful, and don't let the man just now see it." "I know." Modu shrank his neck in fear. Today, every mage has heard the inspirational story about how Senior Bruce struggled to survive in the mirror space for half a month. It was a very sad story. It is a symbol of fire prevention, theft prevention and peace prevention, which is a rule recognized privately by mages, and it has been passed down for 5 or 60 years. The commercial vehicle carrying Kyle passed the main road in front of the SHIELD headquarters because the visit to the church took a long way. Unexpectedly, this old woman, Guyi, is a bit arrogant. In the co-pilot's seat, Kyle shook his head lightly, and with the magical power of his fingertips, he burned the letter with only 8 words to ashes. "Welcome back, the time has not come." The signature of Ancient One was also left on it. "It's not time yet, that is, it's not time to meet and talk." Kyle shrugged, patted the ashes off his hands, and looked relaxed. There are still a few years before the arrival of Thanos, and there is really no rush at this time. "Master, there is a situation." The commercial vehicle arrived at an intersection, and the navigator suddenly sounded Weese's prompt voice. "There are 5 vehicles, deliberately following us, 3 approaching from the left, right and rear, and 2 more at the intersection ahead." "Are you sure?" Kyle was taken aback for a moment, surprised. In New York City, someone actually dared to target him, and wanted to take the initiative to attack him as a symbol of peace? This is really so interesting. He had been idle for the past few weeks, and he hadn't made a move to warm up his lower body, but someone suddenly came to his door, which had to be surprising. Weisi was silent for a few seconds, and said again, "Based on my analysis and judgment, the other party should not be targeting you. There is a high probability that the wrong person was found." "How?" Kyle asked. "Because the car you are sitting in is usually a private car for Nick Fury." So, before Weisi finished speaking, Kyle understood what it meant after inadvertently. It helped Fury attract hatred. Kyle rubbed his chin and thought to himself, however, in the most concentrated area of S.H.I.E.L.D., who would dare to directly attack the former director in the New York City area? It will not be related to the inside plan just mentioned bar. At this time, Weisi hurriedly reminded, "Master, the 2 cars in front are slowing down and approaching. What should we do? What else can be done?" Kyle fastened his seatbelt silently, and said calmly, "Come on, top speed, hit me." If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 271. New York, on a bustling two-lane road in the center of the city. Three Volkswagen vehicles of different models accelerated slightly at the same time, drawing closer to the black commercial vehicle from behind, as if forming a blockade that was quietly shrinking. The two vehicles in front, a truck and a van, slowed down and seemed to be using their bodies as roadblocks. The target vehicle has no abnormalities, so it should not have spotted us yet. Now, all assault members are ready to attack. The commando leader on the rear vehicle squatted in the back compartment of the van with a gun, commanding the chicken compact walkie-talkie. I'll count to 3. 3, 2, the 5 armed and camouflage vehicles, like predators lurking in the dense traffic, all naturally approached the target commercial vehicle, and they were about to join forces to launch a powerful offensive that would kill with one blow. But Commando Captain's one hasn't been said yet. The four wheels of the commercial vehicle were spinning crazily, the tail flames shot out, the engine roared, and it rushed out like an angry bull. What's the situation? The assault team was in shock, thinking that the target vehicle wanted to escape, but the next moment, a scene that left them dumbfounded appeared. I saw the commercial vehicle accelerating in a straight line, sprinting into the rear of the van at full speed, and flipping the vehicle to the ground from the side. The van roared, rolled and slid on the road for a distance of more than 10 meters, bright sparks splash all the way. All of a sudden, the vehicles coming and going at the intersection were in chaos, honking their horns, avoiding or making emergency stops one after another. He didn't run away immediately, but took the initiative to attack. The commando captain's brain went down for a while, and without hesitation too much, he shouted hoarsely, "Fuck. We've been exposed, let me attack everyone. We must not let him escape." As soon as his words fell, the large heavyweight truck suddenly sped up and backed up, hitting the head of the commercial vehicle with its rear, turning into an absolutely hard steel barricade. The three cars in the rear immediately accelerated and hit from the rear and left and right sides, completely blocking the target commercial vehicle's path. Although it has withstood so many violent impacts, the commercial vehicle is almost intact, and there is not even a single crack in the windows and windshield glass. At this time, the interior of the commercial vehicle. Wissy was a little surprised and said, "Good guy, the protection factor of this car is very high. If there is no high-intensity thermal weapon to continuously attack, it is impossible to force it open from the outside." Its analysis is not finished yet. The windows of the surrounding armed camouflage vehicles were rolled down, revealing the special muzzles of the internal machine guns, aiming at the commercial vehicle they were in. "Okay. Pretend I didn't say it." Weiss was a little embarrassed. The barrel of the machine gun rotated and started, and accompanied by the sound of passionate rattling gunshots, the dense bullets turned into a torrent of steel, pouring bombardment on the body of the commercial vehicle. The commercial vehicle was shaking, and cracks began to bloom on the window glass. "I didn't even think about shrinking here." Kyle shrugged, unbuckled his seat belt, and was about to open the car door and walk out. Wissy suddenly made a beeping sound, and said, "Master, I have a call from you, and it is from Secretary Yutong." A call at this time. Kyle thought for a while, retracted the palm of the door, guessing that the car's protection could last for a while, nodded and said, "Get it through." Half a second later, Yutong's melodious and crisp voice sounded, "Boss, what's the matter?" "Long story short," Kyle said softly. Yutong immediately reported 2 things. 1. Just now our people found the suspected trace of Bucky Barnes, and he himself is now in the New York City area. "Go on, what about the second thing?" Kyle asked, looking around. Under the continuous shooting of machine guns, the commercial vehicle trembled violently, and the window glass was covered with cracks like spider webs, approaching the limit of what it could bear. Yutong said softly, "The second thing. Just now, Nick Fury was attacked by mysterious forces for unknown reasons." She heard the strange noises from Kyle's side, and asked, "By the way, boss, what happened to you?" "Nothing, just some annoying flies." Kyle's words were only halfway through when the windows of the commercial vehicle finally completed their mission and shattered. Bullets poured powerfully into the interior of the compartment, sweeping away everything in sight at the same time. The commando captain also received a liaison communication. After he connected and listened for a while, he showed a blank expression. "What are you talking about? The target person is on another street? How is this possible? Then who is our team attacking now?" On the other end of the phone, a bitter and horrified response came from the person in charge of the operation. "Not long this morning, That one seemed to have come to the SHIELD headquarters. Remember, from now on, you are not members of SHIELD. Give you a piece of advice: if you can escape, escape as soon as possible. After the man finished speaking, the satellite contact was hung up in a hurry, as if he was afraid of getting into trouble. Hearing the busy tone, the commando leader couldn't help being stunned. Looking at the commercial vehicle beside him that was badly damaged by bullets, he thought of a possibility. His face was pale, his battle clothes were wet with cold sweat, and he said to himself with trembling teeth, "The headquarters won't play me like this. Besides that man, who else can make the top of SHIELD so terrified? Captain, do you want to step up the offensive?" It just so happened that the team member's question came from the headset. The corner of the commando captain's mouth twitched slightly, and he said in fear, "What are you attacking? Withdraw quickly, withdraw." All the assault members were taken aback. "Our target is wrong, and what we are attacking now is probably, hoo-hoo." The hot wind raged, and a group of golden hot flames rushed out of the abandoned commercial vehicle, like a small sun rising up. The body of the commercial vehicle and the bullets approaching were all melted into molten iron under the high temperature. Under the horrified eyes of the members of the assault team, Kyle stepped out surrounded by flickering flames, tall and strong, and glanced indifferently at the surrounding vehicles. A symbol of peace, all of them had dull eyes, pale faces, and their mouths and noses were overwhelmed with fear. In New York, a blatant attack on a peace symbol, no one can afford this crime. "Quickly withdraw, withdraw," the assault members were screaming almost in unison. The four vehicles adjusted their direction in a panic, trying to flee the scene. "Since you're here, don't leave." Kyle raised his eyes, divine power coiled around his arm, and then surged out from his open palm. When the firepower left the body, it turned into a scorching golden flame, raging towards the edge, engulfing people and vehicles. There was a scream, and in just a few seconds, only the wreckage of the vehicle was left burning vigorously. "Assault squad, wipe out." "Bucky, isn't it here?" Kyle glanced around, pulled out the Venom card, and spread out the dark wings after symbiosis. He soared into the sky, his speed reached supersonic speed in an instant, and he turned into a black streamer and returned to the Emgren building. Chapter 272: The Nine-Headed Snake Who Caused Trouble. DeHale Building, the top floor office. Stopped at a high speed, Kyle landed on the balcony, the dark wings retracted, and the Venom body was redisguised and transformed into a leather jacket. "Boss, you are back," Yu-Tong, who had been waiting in the office for a long time, greeted her lightly with curly steps. "What is the specific situation now? One by one, please tell me slowly." With a calm face, Kyle walked to the sofa and sat down, leaning comfortably on the back of the chair, and raised his legs by the way. He looked like he wasn't in a hurry. Indeed, there are really not many things that can make him anxious now. Unless the Earth will usher in the end of the world tomorrow, it will all be small fights among human beings. "Okay," Yu-Tong also understood, waved his hand lightly, and took out the preserved wine and the cup from the wine cabinet with his mind. She sat down next to Kyle, opened the wine cap for him, slowly filled half the glass with her own hands, and said softly, "Bucky Barnter, who was suspected of being organized by Hydra 10 years ago, found it from our family's old manor. The people of Hydra may have mastered the brainwashing experiment in the Soviet Red Room, and they have achieved control over Bucky Barnter, who is now codenamed Winter Soldier." Yu-Tong paused, and continued, "In the past 10 years, the Winter Soldier, who has hidden his identity, has been carrying out some secret operations for the Hydra organization, such as assassinating a country's politicians, scientists, and high-level military officials." Hydra organization, Kyle muttered to himself, his face sank like water, and he took a sip from his wine glass. It has to be said that the Hydra organization is not strong, but it is like a cancerous tumor and a shit stick on the earth. Kill a head and a second head will grow. The extraordinary regenerative ability of the fresh blood of their members, in addition to making people think carefully, is more disgusting and helpless. It's like human beings are many times stronger than cockroaches, but they cannot be completely eradicated from their own kitchens. I froze Bucky at the beginning, and my original intention was to keep him away from disputes and wait for the peaceful era to come. Kyle raised his head, his face turned cold and said, "The Hydra organization dares to go to the old family site to give people away. Take it away." "It doesn't take me seriously, Rain pupil." Kyle slammed his mouth. "Yes," Yu-Tong responded. Kyle said coldly, "I will pass on my instructions later. From now on, members of the Hydra organization will be the family's primary targets, double the rewards for the family's contribution points, and mobilize all card followers outside to conduct secret raids and assassinations. After killing people or destroying the base, leave behind the demon card of the family emblem. If you find the medium and large underground base of Hydra, you can make a special trip to Hellfire, Kyle added. I understand. Yutong's heart moved slightly, knowing that the boss was going to take the Hydra organization to the knife. If we want to meet future alien invasion wars, we must secure the Earth as the rear. Kyle felt that Hydra should be taught a good lesson as it was during World War II. Whose surname is engraved on this Earth, and whose territory is it? Also, about the guy who attacked Nick Fury. As soon as Yutong mentioned it, Kyle waved his hand and said coldly, I already know about that. They are agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., or members of Hydra. Ghost people with dual identities. At the scene of the raid just now, after WC intercepted the satellite communication signal of the assault team through radio waves, he basically judged the general situation from the content. S.H.I.E.L.D. really has Hydra's inner ghost, and has even been polluted by Hydra to become the largest Hydra base in the open. Nick Fury didn't know about it, until there was a problem with the inside plan, and then he began to suspect. After wanting to terminate the plan today, Hydra finally couldn't tolerate it anymore and sent people to attack. And it is not certain that among those sent there's Bucky the Winter Soldier. If Bucky makes a shot, and Natasha just hasn't returned home, that guy Fury's life is really in danger, Kyle muttered to himself and drank the wine in his glass. Yutong frowned slightly, his eyes flickered with silver light, and his thoughts went straight to the downstairs of the building, and the electrocardiogram made contact with Katu, who summarized the information. A second later, she reported, Boss, Fury was attacked at about the same time as you, and now, is about to die. Kyle's face was calm, but under the uncontrollable force, the glass in his hand quietly burst into cracks. A secret basement in Brooklyn. In the emergency room, Fury, who had been shot several times in the body, was lying on the operating table, unconscious from blood loss, wearing an oxygen mask, and the display image of the electrocardiograph beside him was extremely weak. 2 or 3 doctors formed a group to give Fury the final treatment, but the electrocardiogram continued to calm down irretrievably. Next to the door of the emergency room, outside the huge transparent glass window, Steve, Natasha, and 2 female agents stared straight at the indoor ambulance scene with deep and dignified expressions. Please, hold on, Nick, Natasha whispered anxiously. But contrary to expectations, the ECG wires on the ECG instrument suddenly fell silent, becoming a horizontal line for declaring death. The doctors shook their heads slightly, left the operating table with their hands, covered Fury with a white cloth up to his neck, and left the emergency room under the arrangement of the female agent. Natasha sighed helplessly, glanced at Steve next to her, and asked coldly, What did Fury say to you in private at the end? Did he give you what you have? Steve didn't answer. He glanced at Fury's body, then at the USB flash drive in his hand, and said with some kind of decision, Natasha, you are the deputy director of S.H.I.E.L.D. I need now you accompany me to the S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters. Natasha looked straight into his eyes. Steve and her looked at each other, and said firmly, if you want to find the murderer and force who killed Nick, you and I need to go to the S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters to confirm. Okay, I'll go with you, Natasha finally agreed. After the 2 quickly left the basement, the secret basement once again fell into silence. At this time, footsteps sounded in the dark corridor, and 2 figures slowly approached the emergency room. Who is it? A female agent raised her gun vigilantly and stopped at the door. Me, Kyle said, walking out of the darkness, followed by Yutong. Mr. Kyle, the female agent let out a loose tone, showing an excited and ecstatic expression. Kyle nodded, walked past her, and walked into the emergency room vigorously. Looking at the corpse on the operating table, Kyle raised his eyebrows, and said in a cold voice, everyone is gone, stop pretending. 1 second, 3 seconds, 5 seconds. On the operating table, the corpse covered with a white cloth moved its fingers slightly, and then the only remaining right eye opened like a corpse. Enduring the pain in his wound, Fury squeezed out a smile and said, this really can't fool you, Kyle. Nonsense. Kyle smiled lightly. If Fury was really dead, the item cards on his body would have exploded long ago, so why would he still be surrounded by a bunch of ability cards like now? Chapter 273 Cleansing the S.H.I.E.L.D. Plan. Secret Basement. After the doctors, nurses, and Steve and others left, there were only Fury, a female agent, Kyle and Yutong who had just arrived. Fury wanted to sit up from the operating table, but he was seriously injured and hemorrhaged. He was weak and obviously didn't have the strength, so he could only squint at Kyle in embarrassment. The female agent walked up quickly, helped him up, and put a pillow behind his back for him to lean on. Kyle sat down on the chair next to the hospital bed, looked at Fury and said, "It's okay. Seeing that you still have the strength to speak, it's probably not so easy to die. If you die like this, don't put 'I can't afford to be ashamed of the label' like Roarin' Commando acting captain. I can't die." Fury's face was calm. He let out a breath, and tried to explain, "It's cervical spine damage, sternum fracture, liver piercing intestines, etc. Even with the long-term support of infinite ways, he is not young anymore. His dark face is mature in vicissitudes of life, his chin is full of rough beard, and he is used to a serious and steady expression all day long." A series of serious injuries now make Fury look like an elderly middle-aged man. Kyle asked bluntly, "Do you know who the person who shot you is?" Fury was weak, and said slowly and weakly, "Agility, quick response, precise marksmanship. The bullets used are from the Soviet Union, and he is a veteran agent who is proficient in assassination." Kyle shook his head lightly and reminded, "I didn't ask your agent, I'm talking about the person who issued the attack order behind the scenes." Fury fell silent when he heard the words. His face was gloomy and uncertain, and he didn't make another sound for a long time. It seems he knows what's on his mind. Kyle thought to himself, and continued, "When you were attacked, I was also attacked by the same group of people because I borrowed your former chief's special car. Of course, they're all dead now." Fury trembled slightly. The hesitation on his face was evident, and he hesitated to speak. "Aren't you willing to admit it? S.H.I.E.L.D. is now infested by Hydra from top to bottom. They have staff at the upper and lower levels, and they occupy the absolute initiative." Kelton paused, and added a meaningful sentence. "The current director of S.H.I.E.L.D. may be the high-level commander of the Hydra organization." Fury finally couldn't help it, and sighed. "Kyle, you were right last time. I'm really old and useless." He has been known for his strategic command since World War II. How could he not have guessed it until now? But he just thought of it but refused to admit it. The S.H.I.E.L.D., whose purpose is to wipe out the Hydra organization and defend world peace, is actually being used by Hydra. This is an unprecedented world-class scandal. And all of this happened under the nose of his Nick Fury. Fury moved his fingers with difficulty, and pulled out a photo from his pocket, on which was the high-spirited current director of S.H.I.E.L.D., Alexander Pierce. A few years ago, he refused to accept the Nobel Peace Prize. He said, "Peace is not an achievement, but a responsibility." I passed on the position of director of S.H.I.E.L.D. to him. Fury put down the photo and said with a sigh of loss, "I still can't believe that he will be the most important infiltrator of Hydra. Everyone will make mistakes, as long as they can correct and modify in time," Kyle said indifferently. Fury looked at him seriously, and said inexplicably, "Kyle, you never make a mistake. I'm just competent enough to right my mistakes." Kyle shrugged, stood up from his seat, and walked straight out of the door. "The current situation is in line with the agreement you and I said at the beginning. Fury, it is up to me to come forward for the huge mistake you are unable to correct." "Corrected, Kyle?" "No, sir." Furui suddenly became emotional, struggling to get off the operating table. The gauze-wrapped wound immediately tore and blushed, and the female agent hurried forward to support him in fright. Kyle did not look back, and left the emergency room with Yutong. Behind him, Fury's words of persuasion were still coming out intermittently. "Sir, please give S.H.I.E.L.D. a chance. Wait 2 more days, wait 2 more days." It wasn't until they walked into the dark corridor that the voice was completely isolated and disappeared. "Boss," Yutong quickened his pace to keep up, looked at Kyle's stern face like a knife, and asked with slightly parted lips, "Shall we go to the headquarters of S.H.I.E.L.D. now?" Kyle shook his head. "No hurry, it will take another 2 days. Once he takes action on this matter, the whole of New York will be a sensation, and most of the building of S.H.I.E.L.D. will collapse." Although Fury is decisive in doing things, but the S.H.I.E.L.D. has been watered by his hard work for more than, years. Now if he wants to demolish and destroy this super high-rise building, no matter how decisive he is, he will hesitate. Since it is polluted and dirty, it is not so easy to clean it. There is only a tough and straightforward smashing and rebuilding. Kyle thought for a while, and ordered Yutong, "In the past 2 days, pay close attention to the movement of S.H.I.E.L.D. The key point is whether the Insight plan is activated or not. As long as the helicopter carrier hasn't taken to the sky, it doesn't matter if you give it 3 days to breathe. But if the aircraft carrier's Insight plan is launched, It will touch the bottom line that Kyle can currently allow. The shield cleansing plan, from now on, is completely connected to the inside plan. After Kyle left the basement, he and Yutong drove back to the Emgren building. The car parked in front of the main entrance of the building, and there was a noise of arguing at the entrance, which caused Kyle, who had just got out of the car, to cast his gaze in surprise. I saw two tall and mighty Carters in suits and leather shoes, wearing sunglasses, one on the left and one on the right, respectively holding the beautiful girl's arms and moving her feet away from the door. The punk girl struggled violently. Her beautiful face with smoky makeup was full of anger, and found that she couldn't get away with the strength of her arms, so she couldn't help threatening in a cold voice, "Let go of me, or I'll be rude to you too." "How can you be rude to us?" one of the Katas snorted. "Don't force me." The punk girl raised her eyebrows coldly, but Kata didn't notice that the palms of her hands began to glow with a dim green mist. At this moment, a cold and steady voice sounded, "What are you doing?" The two Carters raised their eyes, and when they saw Kyle who had returned to the door, they were taken aback. They hurriedly let go of the punk girl's arm, bowed their heads respectfully, and said, "Hello, patriarch." The punk girl glanced at Kyle, silently lowered her head to straighten her sleeves, and the green mist on her hands disappeared silently, as if it had never appeared before. Another Kato explained, "This girl came to the company's consultation window and insisted that she was a friend of the guardian of Yutong, but she also publicly scolded you." Yutong took a step forward and said softly, "She is indeed my friend." "That's right." The two Carters were stunned. The demon guardian of the family really his friends? "Okay, you can continue to work on your work." Kyle looked at the punk girl and said with a little helplessness, "As for her, let alone scold me 10 times, it's not a big deal." Why did this ant take the initiative to come to the unnatural office? Recommend a friend's book, Saitama's Two-Dimensional Journey, the same semi-invincible style, unlimited categories, friends who like One Punch can go and have a look. Chapter 274 Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch? Guardian friend, I have scolded the patriarch and still ignored it. What is the origin of this girl? The two Carters obeyed the order and returned to their posts. They didn't know that they had escaped quietly. Yutong's only friend, the owner of the ability to control the magnetic field, Lorna. "What are you doing here?" Kyle looked at the punk girl. Ever since he returned to Earth, he had nothing to do with the girl in front of him. And once there is actual contact with the other party, there will be an eye-catching aurora. "I'm here to find Yutong, can't I?" Lorna gave him a blank look, stepped forward, and put her right hand on Yutong's shoulder domineeringly, as if officially declaring her ownership. Yutong didn't reject it either. She just blinked at Kyle. Her jewel-like eyes showed a bit of helplessness. "Let's go upstairs first." Kyle felt a headache, and felt that something good was taken over by the other party. Proud, direct, domineering, rebellious, presumptuous. These are generally used to describe boys, but they are also possessed by a girl, and the other party is also a woman with a perfect appearance. "Okay, since Yutong has followed you, I'll just admit you by the way," Lorna said bluntly. Her hand was naturally about to put on Kyle's shoulder. Kyle reacted extremely quickly, leaning his body slightly, dodging her hand subtly. Lorna was slightly stunned, and then recalled the scene where the two shook hands last time, and couldn't help withdrawing their slender hands embarrassingly. The three entered the private elevator, leading directly to the office on the top floor. Back in the hall, Kyle sat down on the sofa, and Lorna was also unceremonious, sitting next to him on the sofa next to him. The two moved in the same way, raising Erlang's legs together. Yutong smiled slightly, found slippers from the shoe cabinet, selected fine wine from the wine cabinet, and took out 3 cups from the cabinet. The rest of the Kata do not have the authority to enter the top office, so there are not even servants here, and all the cumbersome affairs are done by Yutong alone. Seeing her orderly appearance, Lorna sighed slightly, and said pointingly, "What a wonderful woman. It's a pity to meet a man who doesn't know how to cherish." Kyle pretended not to hear her, uncapped the wine bottle and poured himself a glass. "Pour the one for me too," Lorna said domineeringly, raised her clean and white chin, and gestured lightly to an empty glass on the table. "I have hands, so I poured myself." Kyle stared at her, and took a sip of the mellow red wine. "Let me do it." Yutong walked out of the kitchen, put the fruit plate on the table, picked up the wine bottle, and filled Lorna's empty glass with wine. Kyle coughed lightly. "Yutong, you can't spoil her." Lorna took a sip of the wine, and just relaxed happily. When she heard the words, she suddenly looked annoyed, and retorted, Who has Yutong been spoiling all this time? This woman won't come to snatch Yutong again, will she? Kyle felt a little vigilant in his heart, and tried to ask, Miss Lorna, tell me, what exactly do you want to do here? He really didn't believe that he came here just for Yutong. This time Kyle was mentally prepared and swallowed the wine in advance, for fear that the other party would say some horrible reply from God. Lorna hesitated, and said, actually, I came to this company to apply for a job. Apply? Kyle was stunned. And asked after a moment of thought, do you want to join the unnatural firm? Lorna nodded, and now even Yutong was surprised. Lorna, don't you like to be free? Why do you suddenly want to apply for a job in the company? I don't have money to spend. Can't I find a job and go to work? And I can stay with Yutong every day. Lorna smiled and said, but there was a flash of sadness in her eyes, which soon disappeared. But this was still keenly captured by Kyle. So it turns out that the sadness and fragility in his heart are concealed by a strong and cold appearance. Is this the main source of that domineering and rebelliousness? Kyle suddenly understood something, stared at Lorna, and said, are you still lying? If you want to join the unnatural agency, it should be to borrow resources and find the person you want to find. For example, parents and the like, relatives. As if being hit, Lorna's body trembled violently. She lowered her head and hid her face in her short dark green hair, shaking her shoulders emotionally. Yutong put his hand on her shoulder, his eyes appeared silver light, and comforted her with soft thoughts and voices. Lorna recovered quickly, raised her head, and boldly admitted, yes, I am indeed looking for someone, but it's not my parents. I didn't have any parents before and after I was born. In this way, she is indeed an artificial human in a scientific research and manufacturing laboratory. Kyle had expected this. I want to find my second brother and eldest sister. When I was very young, I stayed with them and was monitored and studied by a group of people. Lorna fell into some kind of painful and unforgettable memories, and said calmly and straightforwardly, we separated later, and I was alone in another basement. I grew up a bit, and they wanted to control me, so I killed them with my ability. Everyone escaped. What she said was calm, but the content was horrifying. No one knew how cruel and terrifying that experience was. Second brother and eldest sister. Kyle's heart moved, as if thinking of something. He asked, what are their names? Lorna shook her head. We didn't have names back then. We only had numbers, and I don't know what they are called now. What about the appearance and features? Kyle asked. Lorna tilted her head and recalled. Second brother, he runs very fast, much faster than us. She paused for a moment and thoughtfully said, as for the eldest sister, she is as beautiful as me. After her ability is awakened, her hair becomes bright red. My hair becomes dark green. Running fast, red hair? That's right. Kyle spread his hands and said precisely, at the beginning, the scientific researchers and forces that imprisoned you were the Hydra organization lurking underground in the world. Hydra organization, Lorna muttered to herself, the disgust in her beautiful eyes hard to hide. As for your second brother and eldest sister, they should still be imprisoned somewhere in the world, Kyle pondered. Those were the only two mutants who appeared in the plot of the original movie, Quicksilver, Scarlet Witch. From the perspective of ability alone, the mutation ability of those two people is definitely no less than magnetic field control. Lorna, Kyle thought for a while, looked directly at her and said seriously, you can join the unnatural firm, but the company is all members of the Carl family, so should you consider joining the Carl family? Lorna asked in surprise. The one like Yutong. One level lower than Yutong, a red rank car disciple, but usually you can follow Yutong. Kyle threw out an olive branch to attract, and said, our family is now preparing to deal with the Hydra organization. If you join, you can use their strength to find the whereabouts of those two people. Then I'll think about it. Lorna nodded. If this conversation spreads out, it is estimated that many people will go crazy with envy. Kyle's personal invitation, one step directly to the red-ranked Katu. What an honor it is. Chapter 275 Codename Polaris. The reason why Kyle was directly invited as the head of the family is that Lorna's ability alone is fully qualified. Just like Yutong back then, although she is young, her potential is not comparable to that of other children. Moreover, you can also use this to build an emotional line in advance. Not only the current Lorna, but also the future Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, he all wants to be drawn into the family. The Carl family now has a large number of mid to low-end fighters, but still lacks high-end fighters who can stand alone. If the three Lorna siblings who are mutants join, it will be truly even more powerful. At that time, not only the strongest family on the earth, but also the strongest force on the earth will be worthy of the name. It's not enough, we need to prepare more countermeasures. Kyle sighed secretly, raised his head lightly, and drank the wine in the glass in one gulp. His mind is not all focused on the Hydra that is doing evil right now, but still looking forward to the Titan King who sits high on the throne of the universe and galaxies. No matter how strong you are, you can only be the land god of the earth, and the future enemy is the real overlord of the universe. Kyle can feel the pressure of time, and the crisis of doomsday is getting closer. The more powerful you stand on the peak, the more you can perceive the worries from beyond the sky. This may be the reason why you are as strong as the ancient master, and you are still thinking about it all day long. Lorna looked at Kyle, who fell silent, with inexplicable emotions in her heart, and a sudden urge to get closer to the past. It's just that when she saw Yutong sitting next to her, all her emotions and reveries were restrained, and all her movement stopped again. Lorna bit her lips lightly, made a certain decision, and pretended to be relaxed and said, "Hey, I've made up my mind, then I'll join and try it out first. Are you sure?" Kyle looked at her suspiciously, deeply surprised. This so-called consideration doesn't even take 10 seconds, right? However, the other party agreed, which still made him feel happy. There are still many family benefits that can be temporarily waived. What? You regretted it? Lorna rolled her eyes and asked back with her arms crossed. How can I take back what I said? Kyle smiled, and said in a deep voice, family members often use code names instead of names when they are out in action. You can take a code name now. Afterwards, Yutong will log your personal information into the family steward, the profile of the Lord God Library, and send a reminder to all card players that new members will join. Family code name. Lorna thought for a while. Her cheeks were slightly rosy. She waved her hand indifferently and said, then it's called Polaris. This name sounds nothing at first glance, but only by digging deeper can one understand the deep meaning contained in it. The Polaris, the starry sky at the North Pole, represents the aurora. Yutong looked at Lorna with a cold face, and a gleam of worry flashed across her beautiful eyes. North Star, a good name. Kyle didn't think too much about it, and by the way, let we see open Lorna's family authority as a red rank card disciple. Lorna looked at Yutong, her eyes stayed on the uniform of the long black dress. She blinked and said, after that, do I have to wear the same clothes as Yutong? You? Kyle frowned slightly, and looked at Lorna from head to toe, which made Lorna uncomfortable, and rubbed her fingers coyly. Then, Kyle shook his head and said lightly, forget it, that style doesn't suit you, so you can wear a leather jacket like Natasha's and act as a pure follower. Lorna's expression froze immediately, her delicate eyebrows raised, and her cold and handsome face was gloomy. Kyle stood up from his seat and looked down at her seriously. Remember, from now on, you are a member of the Carl family. Regardless of life or death, you can't get rid of this title in your life. Lorna's heart trembled. She nodded subconsciously. She stood up, bent her waist slightly, stretched her right hand forward, and said bluntly, got it, boss. Kyle smiled, without hesitation this time, and tapped the white palm with his fingers. For an instant, the gorgeous aurora glowed, and then dimmed and extinguished in an instant. After Kyle returned to the room to rest, only Yutong and Lorna were left in the lobby of the top floor office. Lorna was still in a daze, taking a sip of the red wine, secretly looking at her palm from time to time, not knowing what was going on in her heart. Watching all this from the sidelines, Yutong's jewel-like eyes became more worried. She used her powers, and secretly said a few words to Lorna with her heart. Lorna's face changed drastically. She put the cup back on the table in a panic, and explained a little far-fetchedly, Yutong, you are thinking too much. I just want to guard by your side to prevent you from being hurt by him. Aren't you buying one get one free? Yutong rolled her eyes lightly, but she didn't say anything. She was just worried for Lorna. Boss, everything tends to be perfect, but there is a serious lack of emotion in a certain aspect, and his personality as a human being is indifferent and ruthless. As long as you walk into this pit, you will never be able to get out of it, and you can only sink indefinitely and wait. One day, you will understand that we are not good enough, but we are half a century late and missed the best period. Yutong finally warned Lorna with her heart, but she didn't make any more persuasion. What she didn't know was that this rekindled Lorna's competitiveness. Sleep in the afternoon and sleep until night. Kyle woke up refreshed, and when Yutong left the room, Yutong had a new message about S.H.I.E.L.D. Afternoon. Captain America Steve and S.H.I.E.L.D. Deputy Director Natasha entered the S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters together. Half an hour later, S.H.I.E.L.D. Director of the Bureau issued an official wanted warrant at S.H.I.E.L.D. What about now? Kyle asked while washing his face. Yu Tong reported, the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents haven't been able to arrest them yet. In addition, our people sent information that Steve and Natasha had left New York City by car and headed for New Jersey. New Jersey? Kyle heard something familiar, and immediately murmured, Weiss, open the map of the United States, and let me see the general location of New Jersey. Yes, master. Weiss appeared out of nowhere, jumped to the side of the washing table, and shot out a circular digital projection map with his mechanical eyes. Kyle only glanced at it, and said thoughtfully, it turns out that this is the case. New Jersey, very close to a recruit training base. The recruit base? Master, there is no military base in this area, Weiss reminded. Of course. After all, it was the recruit base in 1944. That's where Steve and I came from. There's nothing wrong with that, Kyle smiled. Looking back now, that was the original origin, the place where rebirth came. Get ready for the fighter plane, let's go and have a look, Kyle said excitedly. Yes, Yu Tong and Weiss responded together. I have a cold, chapter 233 tonight. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone, see you in the next video.